Chapter 1805. Ning Xuema frowned. But I've been here for half a day and haven't seen any unicorns. How do we lure it out? Shui Lan pursed his lips. I have a way. He suddenly rolled up his sleeves and used his palm like a knife to cut off the fleshy part of his arm. A piece of flesh the size of a child's palm was cut off. Blood immediately flowed out. Ning Xuema's complexion changed. What are you doing? She raised her finger and a white light circled around Shui Lan's injured arm, stopping the blood flow. Shui Lan stared at her for a moment before turning his eyes away. He explained indifferently, using the flesh as bait can lure the beast out. Its skin is not afraid of any sword or saber. Its only weakness is its mouth. If you inject the 3 true fire into its mouth, it will be killed. As he spoke, he had already tossed the piece of flesh into the air. The piece of flesh floated above the river, about half a foot above the water's surface. It was unknown what method he used, but the smell of blood filled the entire space. Ning Xuema didn't say anything. Instead, she took out a medicine bottle and threw it to him. Apply this. Shui Lan didn't stand on ceremony. He took the bottle and applied the medicine to his wound without hesitation. Ning Xuema had specially refined this medicine for people with devil and yao bodies. It was the right medicine to treat this kind of wound. After a moment, the wound already showed signs of healing. Many thanks. Ning Xuema spoke. She knew he did it for her. Shui Lan didn't look at her. He only replied indifferently, "You don't need to be polite with me." He stood by the river, dressed in red. His pitch-black hair hung down to his side like satin. His posture was tall and straight, and his back was elegant and unique. He was like the youth she had met in the past. When he shed his enchanting charm, there was a hint of loneliness on his body. Ning Xuema moved her eyes away. She didn't know what to feel in her heart. Back then, if Shui Emo hadn't saved him, or if she had saved him instead of bringing him into the demonic path, would his fate have been different? She didn't want to think about it, nor did she want to think about it. Her gaze fell on the Red Spring River, and her fingers gripped the hilt of the Sky Splitter sword tightly. The Red Spring River began to bubble, and a moment later, a strange buzzing sound came from the sky. A wild beast that looked like a pufferfish but was 3 times larger and had a sharp horn on its head jumped out of the river. It opened its mouth full of sharp teeth and pounced on the piece of flesh. Now is the time. Ning Xuema flew up and waved the Sky Splitter sword in her hand. A stream of Samadhi true fire that she had long prepared was like a stream of light and a flash of lightning, flying straight towards the monster's big mouth. The monster was also a smart one. Its reaction was abnormally fast. It immediately closed its mouth. Ning Xuema's 3 true fire hit its lips. Its lips were as tough as its skin. Ning Xuema's Shurkill attack only left 2 blisters on its lips. It didn't cause any substantial damage. The unicorn was furious. It probably knew that its mouth was its only weakness. Although it was so angry that all the scales on its body stood up, it didn't open its mouth again. With a slap of its tail, a bright red wave of water splashed towards Ning Xuema and Shui Yi. This red spring water corroded everything it touched. Nothing could stop it, so Ning Xuema and Shui Yi could only dodge. Ning Xuema's movements were fast, but Shui Lan's movements were a bit slower. Just as a small wave of red spring water was about to splash onto his shoulder, Ning Xuema's figure flashed like lightning. She suddenly pulled Shui Lan and at the same time threw a large stone towards that wave of water. Chapter 1806. The water wave hit the big rock, which instantly disappeared. The water wave was blocked by the big rock and flowed to the ground, corroding a hole and flowing back into the Red Spring River. Shui Lan's face was slightly pale. He turned to look at Ning Xuema beside him. If she hadn't moved quickly, his shoulder would have been cut off. Be careful. Don't let your mind wander. After Ning Xuema threw down these words, she flew away and directly rushed towards the unicorn. Shui Lan's body stiffened, pain flashing through his eyes. At this time, it was like the time when he and Shui Emo fought side by side. He was her bodyguard, but hadn't she saved his life time and time again? The battle was in progress, so he didn't have the time to think any further. His figure flashed and flew towards the unicorn as well. Lead it to a place without water, Ning Xuema said. The two tried to lead the unicorn to the shore. However, the unicorn was also very cunning. It seemed to know that it couldn't do anything without water, so once Ning Xuema and Shui Lan got too far away from the water, it couldn't attack them with waves, so it wanted to sink into the water. Damn it! It actually had the intelligence of the sand monk. Ning Xuema cursed in her heart. She steeled her heart and slashed the sky splitter sword across her palm. Blood flowed out and dripped onto the unicorn's head. Since the unicorn liked to eat flesh, she only needed to use her blood to lead it to the shore and then cook it. Her plan wasn't bad, but for some reason, the unicorn wasn't interested in her blood. Her blood had dripped onto its head, but it could still turn a blind eye to it. Fuck. She had the demon lord's blood. Even the demon lord's blood was despised. Was it just blood? Did it still need meat? If you can't bear to part with the child, you can't trap the wolf. Ning Xuema steeled her heart and was about to cut off a piece of flesh from her arm. Shui Lan was already above her. Your blood won't do. Use mine. He also cut his palm and let the blood drip down. The unicorn's small eyes suddenly opened wide, like a heavy smoker who suddenly smelled smoke. With a splash, it jumped out of the water and opened its mouth to bite Shui Lan's hand. Use the 3 true fire, Shui Lan shouted. Instead of retreating, he moved forward. He stretched out his arm, and half of his fist actually went into the monster's mouth. The monster clenched its sharp teeth, causing blood to spurt out. However, it could not bite down. The bones in Shui Lan's hand became harder than diamond. Shui Lan was unable to break it in a short period of time, and of course, it was unable to close its mouth. Ning Xuema's heart suddenly tightened. Shui Lan had sacrificed a hand to create this opportunity for her, so of course she couldn't miss it. With a wave of her hand, the 3 true flames were released once again. Like a flash of lightning, it drilled into the mouth of the unicorn that couldn't close. Her 3 true flames were extremely pure. How could the unicorn withstand it? With a pitiful cry, it fell onto the shore with a thud. Its body twitched a few times, and then it stopped moving. Ning Xuema didn't care about the unicorn. She first looked at Shui Lan's hand, and then she sucked in a breath of cold air. Shui Lan's hand was completely gone, and only a piece of white bone was left. His face was deathly pale, but he still had a carefree attitude. It's okay. I'm a demon king. This hand can still recover. You go and deal with the unicorn first. Ning Xuema took a deep breath and only said one sentence. Give me your hand. She had a kind of aura that didn't allow people to refuse. Shui Lan was startled for a moment, and slowly handed over the white bone hand. Chapter 1807. Not only were the unicorn's teeth sharp, but its tongue was also corrosive. It melted the skin and flesh of the hand that he put into its mouth. Ning Xuema first used a cleaning spell to clean him, then took out the flesh revitalization ointment that Shinjiuli had made and applied it on him. Shinjiuli had said that as long as his ointment was applied, even if only bones were left, the flesh and blood could be restored. It just needed a slightly longer time. Shui Lan lowered his eyes to look at her, who was busy with his hand. There was clearly only bones left on his hand, and he couldn't feel anything, but when her little hand held onto his bone hand and applied the ointment, he could still feel a warm current surging up. Then, a tinge of sadness flashed past his eyes. He knew that she was treating him purely for the sake of her companions. In her heart, he was at most a friend. Ning Xuema's hands were fast, and she quickly finished bandaging him. She then instructed him, meditate and heal your injuries for now, I'll skin it. Shui Lan didn't argue with her and nodded. He quickly explained the main points of skinning this kind of unicorn before meditating to recover. Since Ningxuama had been a physician before, her skinning skills were naturally practiced to perfection. After she grasped the main points, she immediately started. In less than an hour, the skin of the monster was peeled off by her. This unicorn's skin is big enough to sew 2 people's robes. Sew one for me too, Shuilan said. Ningxuama frowned. Shuilan, you don't have to follow me, you should return to the surface first. I don't need anyone to follow me. It was dangerous to find Mother Earth, and she didn't want Shuilan to follow her into danger. She also didn't want to owe him a favor. Shuama, if you don't want to sew for me, I can hunt another one after you leave, Shuilan said indifferently. What he meant was that he was going to follow her. Ningxuama felt a headache coming on. Shuilan, why are you so stubborn, Shuama? I'm not being stubborn, and I'm not being selfish. You're the demon master, the backbone of both the demon realm and the demon realm. It's only right for me to protect you. Don't worry, I know my place in your heart, and I won't cause you any trouble. When he said that, Ningxuama couldn't refute him anymore. However, she knew that Shuilan had feelings for her. If she continued to be involved with him, she was afraid that this kind of thing would happen more often in the future. She paused and was about to rephrase her words. Shuilan spoke again, Shuama, I'm not here to protect you for nothing. I have a favor to ask of you. Ningxuama raised her eyebrows. Go ahead. As long as it wasn't a matter of forced feelings, she could agree to anything. Shuilan stared at her. Shuama, I know that it's impossible between you and me. In order to protect the Snow Mermaid clan, I'm interested in that Ice Jade Fairy. Ice Jade Fairy also has feelings for me, but she's a fairy, and I'm a demon. According to the rules of the demon realm, fairies and demons can't love each other. Otherwise, she'll suffer from the heavenly tribulation, unless the celestial emperor personally promises to marry her. Ningxuama was stunned. Shuilan finally had the idea of marrying her. She still had a very good impression of that Ice Jade Fairy. It was as if a huge rock had been removed from her heart. She couldn't help but smile. When did you and Ice Jade Fairy meet? Shuilan glanced at her face and saw her smile. It was a genuine smile of relaxation, and nothing else. His eyes darkened. Chapter 1808. His eyes darkened for a second, but then returned to normal. When I was sealing Xi, I cooperated with her. We cooperated very happily. After we came out, we drank a few more times, and we got along very well. The reason I came here to find you is because I want you to stand out and seek justice for us. No problem. Ningxuama said almost without hesitation. Don't worry, the Heaven Emperor will still give me face. Then, thank you. Shuilan smiled. His smile was as beautiful as a spring flower. We are friends, so you are welcome. Ningxuama answered quickly. I am relieved to hear that. Shuama, go and sew the robes. Remember to give me one. At this point, Shuilan had obviously made up his mind. Even if Ningxuama didn't let him follow, he would follow behind secretly. It was better to go together, and they could take care of each other. She had no choice but to use the unicorn's skin to make 2 leather robes and gave one to Shuilan. She was still worried, so she looked at his injured arm. You are now, don't worry. Even if I lose an arm, I can still move as usual, not to mention that it is just a flesh wound. Shuilan smiled elegantly, but his tone was firm. Let's go. He put on the leather robe and sealed it completely with a spell. Then, he jumped into the Red Spring River. Ningxuama followed suit and jumped in as well. In the sealed leather robes, they couldn't see the water with their eyes. Fortunately, their skills were high enough to open their third eye. Their third eye was different from ordinary third eyes. After opening their third eye, they could see the scenery outside clearly. Although the Red Spring River melted everything it saw, it was only for ordinary things. there were still some strange species in the river. When Ning Shuama walked in the water, she found several kinds of animals, including fish and shrimps. Of course, they looked different from those commonly seen on land. Every animal had a mouthful of sharp fangs. Even shrimps could eat meat. The natural selection inside wasn't any worse than the outside world. All kinds of creatures would fight to the death if they encountered one another. Naturally, Ning Shuama's pouches also attracted the attacks of other creatures. A few strange-looking big fishes almost bit open Shui Lan's leather robe. Fortunately, Ning Shuama followed closely behind and pulled the big fish away with both hands. The big fish's skin could not be broken, so she simply used her palm strength to directly shatter the big fish's internal organs. Then, she threw it out, attracting a few more strange fish to snatch it. Fortunately, Ning Shuama didn't want to swim in the Red Spring River. She just wanted to go through it. The two of them helped each other to drive away the other carnivorous creatures. After a short while, they reached the bottom of the river and dived into the red mud below. The red mud was extremely difficult to pass through even with the ground drilling technique. Ning Shuama was fine, but Shui Lan was not as strong as her, and he was injured. After they got out of the red mud area, the two of them came to a wide undercurrent where they could rest for a while. The two of them took off their tight leather robes. Shui Lan's face was pale, and his red lips were also pale. Ning Shuama glanced at him, then sat down on a big rock. Let's take a rest. There was no air deep underground. Fortunately, the two of them could breathe with their telekinesis, so they didn't feel suffocated. How's your injury? Ning Shuama's eyes fell on the bandage on his hand. There was blood seeping out from it again. It's fine. I used a little bit of strength when I used the spell just now, so it opened up a little. It's starting to heal now. Shui Lan's eyes were like water, and he smiled casually. Chapter 1809. Ning Shuama was very confident in Shinjuli's medicine. Hearing Shui Lan's words, she was relieved. I'll lead the way later. Try to use as little telekinesis as possible. Just focus on healing your wounds. Okay. Shui Lan agreed. He was still in the mood to joke, then the capable will have more work. I can just be a follower in the back. The two of them chatted for a while, and the atmosphere became more harmonious. Shui Lan lowered his eyes slightly. How long had it been since he had interacted with her without any grudges? Shui Lan, have you been here before? Ning Shuama felt that Shui Lan was extraordinarily familiar with the terrain here. Shui Lan paused for a moment and said, Yes, I was here 50,000 years ago. He sighed again. The world above has changed a lot, but this place hasn't changed much. 50,000 years ago? He remembered what happened 50,000 years ago. Ning Shuama's heart skipped a beat. Since she had nothing to do, she decided to ask him about what happened 50,000 years ago. Shui Lan didn't hide anything and told her about his experience 50,000 years ago. Ning Shuama remembered her dream about the Devil Lord. When she was the Devil Lord, she unified the two realms of monsters and demons. If Shui Lan was the Devil Lord, there was no reason why she didn't know about it. She asked about the years and counted silently. It seemed that the Devil Lord Shuama was before Shui Lan. Was Shui Lan also related to her in that era? She asked, Did you know me 50,000 years ago? Shui Lan looked at her, paused for a moment, and shook his head. No, I only heard about you. What did you hear about me? I heard that you were the Devil Lord, the spiritual leader of the three realms of monsters and demons. You were on par with Shinjuli. Anything else? I haven't heard of anything else. I heard that you lived in seclusion on the 35th floor of the heavens and didn't return to the demon realm for hundreds of years. Ning Shuama stopped talking. At that time, Shinjuli lived on the 36th floor of heaven, but she lived on the 35th floor of heaven. Could it be that she was pestering Shinjuli to be her husband at that time? Too busy to care about what happens next. She thought about the character of Shuama in her dream. She didn't seem like a person who really cared about the big picture and was responsible for the rise and fall of the monsters and demons. She unified the demon realm only because those demons bullied her. She didn't want to be bullied, so she dealt with those big and small demons. As for unifying the devil realm, her goal was even simpler. She only wanted the flower that could make her grow faster. Therefore, after she hid in the 35th heaven, even if the monster realm and devil realm were in a mess, she was too lazy to care. Ning Xuema raised her hand and rubbed the space between her eyebrows. She hadn't dreamt enough about the dream 50,000 years ago. There were still many inside stories that she didn't know. The two of them rested for a while. Ning Xuema saw that Shui Lan's complexion finally looked better. She then looked at his hand without batting an eyelid. His hand was no longer bleeding, so he should have recovered. Shui Lan was a considerate person. He stood up and said, "Let's go." In a cold and dark sea of bones. Yes, there was a sea of bones in front of her. However, the bones here weren't deathly white, but pitch black. Every bone seemed to have been roasted in a big fire, glowing with a gloomy luster. Ning Xuema felt like she was in the 10,000 beast bone pit, where all kinds of bones were present. All kinds of animal leg bones, skulls, arm bones, tail bones, ribs, pelvic bones. They were densely overlapped, but all the tips were pointing upwards. All kinds of bone spurs were like swords, pointing upwards. Chapter 18:10. If the two of them wanted to continue forward, they would have to pass through this forest of bones. Ning Xuema also knew that everything underground could not be judged with common sense, so she first used the shark veil to roll up a piece of bone to take a look. She felt a chill in her heart. This bone was as hard as iron and cold to the touch. Her shark veil, which was impervious to all poisons, only wrapped around it slightly before it began to melt. If Ning Xuema did not let go quickly, she was afraid that a layer of her skin would have melted. This sea of bones was the same as the Red Spring River. They could not go around it and could only pass through it. "We can set up a barrier to pass through here." Shui Lan spoke beside her and added, "Set up a wood barrier. Be careful not to touch those skulls. It should be fine." Ning Xuema did not say anything and set up a wood barrier for herself first. "I will scout ahead." Before she could finish speaking, Shui Lan had already rushed to the front. His voice sounded like he was laughing yet not laughing. "Xuema, you should let your subordinates clear the way. In any case, I have been here once before. I have more experience than you." He took out his sword and flames that were about a foot long appeared on it. From time to time, he would slash the various bones that were blocking the way as he rushed forward. Ning Xuema naturally followed behind him. These bones were extremely strange. They had a very strong regenerative ability. Shui Lan used all his strength to slash the bones that were blocking the way. However, as the two of them walked in front, the bones behind them would recover to their original state. It was extremely strange. These bones grew at different speeds. Some of the bones that had just been broken, and before they could rush over, they would grow back with a whoosh. They were like sharp swords that almost pierced the two of them. Fortunately, Ning Xuema reacted quickly. If she felt that something was wrong, the sky splitter sword in her hand would attack and slash those bones again. This sea of bones that was rumored to be the most difficult to pass through was actually easily passed through with Shui Lan's help. When they reached the other side, Ning Xuema let out a long sigh of relief. General Manager He Mu had said that there was an extremely strange monster hidden in the sea of bones. Every time someone tried to pass through, they would be intercepted and killed by it. Very few people were lucky enough to escape. She had been on guard with the sky splitter sword just now, but now it seemed that she was fine. It seemed that the monster had fallen asleep at the bottom of the sea and had not sensed anyone passing through. This time, Shui Lan had put in the most effort to get through the bone sea. Naturally, he had sweated the most. His red robes were drenched in sweat, and he looked like he had just been fished out of the water. Probably because his sweat had soaked his wounds, there was even a faint smell of blood on his body. As soon as he reached the other side, he immediately sat down. He didn't even have the strength to use the cleansing spell. He raised his sleeve to wipe the sweat on his forehead and closed his eyes for a moment. Ning Xuema didn't say anything, but used a cleansing spell on him, making him dry again. Because it was still dark underground, Ning Xuema couldn't see the color of his robes clearly. She could only faintly feel that his robes seemed to have become even redder. "How are you?" Ning Xuema gave him a pill to recover his psychokinesis. Shui Lan took it and ate it. He then raised his finger and pointed towards the southeast. "Xuema, that Mother Earth is in Mythical Fire Palace, 10 miles away from here. You can go and find her yourself." Ning Xuema's heart stirred. So Shui Lan had already known her motive for coming here. She looked at Shui Lan. "What about you? You're not going?" There was only a mechanism formation in front of them, and with Ning Xuema's abilities, mere mechanisms naturally couldn't trouble her. It was the easiest place to pass. Shui Lan had stopped here. Shui Lan's eyes seemed to have water ripples, and he seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. "What? Xuema, you can't leave me now?" Chapter 18:11. This scoundrel. He wasn't serious for long, and now he's not serious again. Ning Xuema couldn't be bothered with him and turned to leave. Shui Lan's voice rang out behind her. "Xuema, I have another favor to ask of you." These words sounded quite serious. Ning Xuema turned her head and asked, "Is there anything else?" Shui Lan took out a box from his chest. "Help me ask Mother Earth what kind of flower this is." Ning Xuema opened it to take a look. It was a kind of purple flower specimen that was the size of the legendary tyrant flower. Folded in the box, it looked like an umbrella. This flower looked very strange, and Ning Xuema didn't recognize it. She closed the box again and took a glance at Shui Lan. "This is the demon flower you wanted me to admire?" Shui Lan nodded his head. "That's right, back then it was like a mushroom pavilion, and the bottom was covered in spores. There were over 100 of them in the demon realm, and they were extremely beautiful, so I wanted you to go and admire them. However, when we returned from Mount Jiai, this flower withered and scattered with the wind. I only managed to save this one. Help me ask, it's rare for a flower to bloom in the demon realm, so it's good to know its species. Since you're here, why don't you let Mother Earth explain it to you personally?" Ning Xuema was bewildered. Shui Lan revealed his signature smile again. "Xuema, you actually still want me to accompany you, right? In that case, I'll go with you." He acted as if he was about to stand up. "I really feel that it's better for you to squat here." Ning Xuema felt that she couldn't be too nice to Shui Lan. This fellow knew how to take advantage of the situation. If you gave him some face, he would want to open a dye house. Ning Xuema's figure floated forward and disappeared in an instant. That fellow was exhausted, so it was good for him to rest there. It was just asking about a flower, it was nothing. Ning Xuema thought so, but she did not look back. Shui Lan watched her figure disappear into the distance. He lowered his eyes slightly and focused on his feet. At some point in time, 2 thin black threads had drilled into his feet and wrapped around his ankles twice. They were very similar to Yu Lao's red threads, except that they were black. Moreover, the black thread that wrapped around his feet was flowing with his blood. The other end of the thread wasn't tied to his lover either. Instead, it stretched straight into the depths of the sea of bones, as if it was the 2 tentacles of a monster. These 2 black lines were extremely thin. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be seen at all. The Lifire Palace was a lonely palace. It was built in the depths of a burning swamp. The whole palace was dark, and there was not a single light in it. Ning Xuema destroyed 3 traps along the way and finally arrived in front of the palace gate. Black plants crawled all over the palace gates, each strand of which looked like a tree root or a snake, sending chills down one's spine. The gate was tightly shut, and the entire palace was filled with these plants. It was as if there were no living creatures inside. It was simply like a place where an old witch lived. What exactly did this Mother Earth look like? Wasn't she lonely living in the depths of this pitch-black underground? Ning Xuema shook her head secretly and knocked on the door. Mother Earth, Devil Master Xuema requests an audience. She said it thrice, but there was no response from inside. It can't be, right? Could he not be at home? She raised her hand and was about to knock again, but she didn't expect the door to suddenly collapse inwards, forming a black hole that led straight inside. Ning Xuema was skilled and daring, so she immediately stepped inside. Chapter 18:12. Passing through that pitch-black hole, she entered a huge hall that was filled with brown tree roots. She finally saw the legendary Mother Earth. She thought Mother Earth would be a person that looked like an old witch, but when she saw her appearance clearly, it was still out of her expectations. That was a person that had yin and yang in one body. His upper body was that of a woman, and his long brown hair flowed to the ground. He had a small face with delicate features, full breasts, and a slender waist. However, his lower body was that of a man, and his 2 long legs were abnormally thick. Only the important parts were covered by a large leaf that could barely cover them, making him look abnormally strange. Beneath his 2 legs were not 2 feet. Instead, they were forked tree roots that went deep into the ground and blended in with the surrounding tree roots. Is this Mother Earth a spirit from some big tree that came to life? This was Ning Xuema's first thought. Her second thought was that this Mother Earth looked familiar, as though she had seen her before. That Mother Earth had a pair of jade-green eyes, and she looked at Ning Xuema. Her gaze seemed to be flickering with fluorescence. Hee, Devil Master. I didn't expect you to come again. Come again? Could she have already come here before? That should be 50,000 years ago, right? No wonder she felt this Mother Earth looked familiar. Ning Xuema didn't come here to exchange greetings, so she nodded her head. Xuema is here to ask for guidance. That Mother Earth's gaze was unfathomable, and she smiled. Seeing how you risked your life to come here, I can tell you everything I know. She didn't expect this Mother Earth to be so easy to talk to. Ning Xuema thought she would make things difficult for her a few times. She let out a sigh of relief and took out those broken petals from her storage space. May I ask, Mother Earth, what species are these flowers? What are their uses? Mother Earth's gaze swept across those flowers, and her gaze shrunk slightly. Where did you get these flowers from? They were given to me by someone. Mother Earth raised her hand, and those broken petals landed in her hand. She looked at those flowers in a slight daze, and after some time, she sighed gently. I didn't expect that person to really gather all these flowers. Her gaze fell on Ning Xuema, sizing her up from head to toe. Ning Xuema's heart trembled, and her gaze turned sharp. Are you talking about God Shinjioli? Could it be that Shinjioli had given her the flowers because of Mother Earth's guidance? Mother Earth's gaze was distant. He didn't report his name. I don't know who he is. However, that person is an outstanding talent among men. He is very handsome. Why is he looking for you? Ning Xuema interrupted her. Mother Earth's gaze focused on her body again. You probably don't know my true identity. Ning Xuema looked at her without saying anything. She knew that she would continue. Little girl, you've probably only heard of this consort's reputation, so you came here recklessly. I'm Mother Earth, the mother of this god-devil continent. I control all the flowers and plants on this god-devil continent, and I'm even known as the medicine god. There's no chronic disease in this world that I can't cure, and there's no flower that I can't recognize. The mother of god-devil continent was also the creator of this continent. No wonder she was called Mother Earth. No wonder she would call her little girl. Since she had a request, Ning Xuema still had a good temper. After listening to her, she asked in a timely manner, May Mother Earth please enlighten me on the functions and origins of these flowers. Mother Earth took a look at her. Little girl is very impatient. She stopped being long-winded and started to introduce the origin and functions of those flowers. Chapter 1813. Ning Xuema listened attentively and was slightly bewildered. Other than the place where these flowers were produced was special, they were basically all from barren hills and unruly rivers, and they were basically guarded by evil beasts. However, such flowers that were hard to pick had ordinary effects. Some caused hallucinations, some cured poison, some promoted blood circulation. There weren't any other special effects. In that case, why did Shinjiuli pick these flowers so painstakingly for her? Just to make her feel touched just because it wasn't easy? Shinjiuli wouldn't be so lame. Finally, Mother Earth finished explaining all the flowers she had taken. That pair of lush green eyes looked at Ning Xuema. Alright, I've finished explaining all the effects of each of them, are you satisfied? Lightning seemed to have flashed in Ning Xuema's mind and she immediately asked, then what's their combined effect? For example, giving a bouquet of these flowers to a certain person every day, what effect can be achieved by giving them for a few consecutive days? Mother Earth's gaze shrunk slightly and she smiled. Little girl is very smart. There was indeed something fishy about giving them all. Ning Xuema smiled slightly and waited for Mother Earth to clear her doubts. Mother Earth's gaze landed on those withered petals and she said leisurely, actually, these flowers aren't complete. Ning Xuema raised her eyebrows. Shinjiuli had given her flowers for a month consecutively, and even though these flowers were all ruined by her, they were all found back in the end. Even though most of them were just branches or petals, however, she still managed to gather all 30 kinds of flowers, so why did she say it wasn't complete? She waited quietly for Mother Earth to continue. Mother Earth didn't disappoint her and continued, I asked him to gather 36 kinds of flowers to fulfill all his wishes, but I didn't expect him to only gather 30 kinds, what a pity. What a pity. Ning Xuema's heart almost jumped out. What's his wish? Mother Earth examined her again. Were you unable to grow up originally? Yes. Ning Xuema didn't deny it. Have you lost your memory before? Yes. That's it. If these flowers are separated, they don't have many excellent functions. But if they are gathered together, they have 2 functions. Actually, it has the effect of curing illnesses. If you collect 30 types of flowers and let the patient touch all 30 types of flowers, the last type of flower's pollen can be inhaled into the patient's mouth. If the patient breathes in a breath of God's breath, it can cure the whirling crystal flower's poison and allow the patient to recover to their normal growth rate. Ning Xuema's face turned slightly pale. What are you doing? To treat your chronic illness. This was what Shinjiuli said after he kissed her forcefully when he gave her the bouquet of flowers. At that time, she thought he was taking advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of her. It turned out that he was really treating her chronic illness. However, it wasn't her heart disease, but her chronic disease of not being able to grow up. In his previous life, Xuema had indeed stopped growing after eating a type of flower poison called whirling heavenly crystal. In that case, what's the effect if I collect all 36 types of flowers? Ning Xuema looked at Mother Earth's face. Mother Earth smiled. These flowers actually have a strange characteristic. When 2 or more types are collected, a heavenly fire flower will grow where the collector lives. When he collects all 36 types of flowers, 36 heavenly fire flowers will grow in his flower bed. When these 36 heavenly fire flowers are gathered, a red bean blood flower will bloom. Eating this flower can cure any amnesia caused by spells, and you will never lose your memory. Ning Xuema, so this was the effect of the heavenly fire flower that Shinjiuli had always been protecting. Back then, when she had accidentally destroyed his heavenly fire flower, his heart ached because of this. Chapter 1814. So this was the effect of the heavenly fire flower that Shinjiuli had been protecting. When she accidentally destroyed his heavenly fire flower, his heart ached because of this. Needless to say, the reason he wanted to cultivate the blood flower of red bean was for her to eat, to let her recover all her memories. No matter if it was pain or hatred, he would stay by her side and give her an explanation. Some misunderstandings could only be solved after the parties recovered their memories. However, this memory loss didn't seem to be suitable for her. It was more suitable for him. After all, he slept for 900 years and forgot everything when he woke up. He should be the one eating the blood flower of red bean. Then who did he prepare this flower for? For her or for himself? Ning Xuema thought about it carefully, and her heart suddenly moved. The heavenly fire flower that she destroyed wasn't just 36 stalks. She felt that there were many more. Could it be that he cultivated double the amount? With Shinjiuli's intelligence and abilities, it was indeed possible for him to cultivate double the amount. Ning Xuema stood there in a daze. She finally solved the mystery of Shinjiuli's flowers, but she still couldn't find the reason why he had to die. Before Shinjiuli returned to Fantian Palace, he tried his best to get her back. He made these flowers to treat her chronic illness and recover her memories. Moreover, she treasured the remaining heavenly fire flower very much. However, after he returned to the Fantian Palace, everything changed. He only wanted to cure her chronic illness and didn't care about the heavenly fire flower that was left in her Mo Palace. This showed that he didn't want her to recover her memories at that time. He even deliberately gave her the cold shoulder, making her feel even more indifferent towards him. This also showed that after he recovered his memories from 50,000 years ago in Fantian Palace, he probably realized that he had to die, which was why he did that later on. He arranged everything calmly and met his death calmly. It seemed like the answer she was looking for was still in Fantian Palace. However, she had already turned Fantian Palace upside down. Other than the dreams that she had when her soul left her body, she didn't find anything meaningful. She thought she could find the real answer on this trip to Mother Earth, but she didn't expect that the answer was still in the fog. She couldn't see it clearly no matter what. This made her a little disappointed, but there was nothing she could do. Just as she was about to bid farewell, she suddenly remembered the box that Shui Lan had given her. She hurriedly took it out and said, "Mother Earth, there's still a flower that needs to be identified." She passed the box over. Mother Earth took it and took a look. Her gaze congealed slightly, and she suddenly raised her head to look at Ning Xuema. "Where did you get this flower from?" "Demon Realm." "How long has this flower been blooming?" Ning Xuema roughly counted the days and said, "It's been about 10 days." Mother Earth frowned slightly. 10 days. Doesn't that mean they are everywhere? Does the demon realm still exist? Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. The flowers have already withered, but they are not blooming everywhere. The demon realm is still as usual. I wonder what this flower is for. It can devour the demon realm? Mother Earth said, "Ziwu Chang." This flower was known as the flower of chaos. Once this flower blooms, the purple fiend that can destroy heaven and earth will erupt within 3 days. Once the purple fiend erupts, this flower will bloom all over the 6 realms. The flower spores will infect all living beings in the 6 realms with the poison of the purple fiend, turning them into mindless monsters that only know how to kill. Ning Xuema was speechless. So this flower was so evil. It seemed that this flower didn't only grow in the demon realm, it grew in other places too. It was just that he didn't get the news. Chapter 18:15. This Mother Earth was so knowledgeable, maybe she knew what happened 50,000 years ago. Mother Earth's gaze landed on Ning Xuema again. Since this flower has already withered, the purple fiend must have been sealed again, right? Yes. May I know how this purple fiend was born? Ning Xuema took the chance to ask. Mother Earth smiled, and her gaze was profound. Heaven and earth are out of harmony, and the heavenly Tao is in chaos. That's why this thing is born. Ning Xuema lowered her eyes and thought for a moment. She asked again, "What do you mean by heaven and earth are out of harmony, and the heavenly Tao is in chaos?" Can Mother Earth give an example? Before the purple fiend erupted, she didn't feel anything wrong with heaven and earth, let alone the heavenly Tao being in chaos. However, Mother Earth suddenly became contemplative. This is a mystery of heaven, it can't be revealed. Ning Shuama. She faintly felt that she was close to the truth, yet there was still a layer of fog separating her. Mother Earth, Shuama still has something to ask. If a person's soul is scattered, can they gather back together? Mother Earth replied coolly, you can go and beg the god. Ning Shuama's heart stirred. Which also meant that Shinjioli had the ability to revive a person whose soul had scattered. In that case, what if the one whose soul had scattered is the god? Ning Shuama held her breath. Mother Earth paused for a moment, and her reply sent Ning Shuama straight to hell. Gods are born with the will of heaven and earth, their souls won't scatter. They will only experience calamities and become immortal, disappearing completely. Ning Shuama's face turned pale. Disappearing completely? No matter what method we use, we can't revive them anymore? Mother Earth lowered her eyes, and her reply this time was slightly mysterious. It's hard to say, heaven and earth need a master, maybe the god will appear again in 100 years. Ning Shuama. Mother Earth's words were like a shot of cardiac stimulant for her. He would appear again in 100 years? It was even earlier than what he had promised her. Her eyes lit up. This news was more meaningful than any other news to her. Her heart almost jumped out of her chest. This was the best and most encouraging answer she had gotten since Shinjioli left. Little Nyenma would be overjoyed if he heard the news. In such a short period of time, her mood had risen and fallen twice. Happiness came too quickly. She wanted to confirm it again. Will God really return in 100 years? Mother Earth looked at her shining eyes and smiled meaningfully. Probably. But what? Mother Earth closed her eyes. The secrets of heaven cannot be revealed. Heavenly secret, your sister. Ning Shuama didn't give up and asked her a few more questions. However, this Mother Earth seemed to have fallen asleep and didn't reply anymore. Ning Shuama wasn't too disappointed. After all, she had received confirmation that Shinjioli could return again. This was better than anything else. She couldn't dig up any more solid information, so she got up and took her leave. Mother Earth looked at her back view disappearing at the door and licked her lips. A demon with a bit of divine bloodline. That must be a wonderful feeling. Huh, poor little girl. She was destined to not be able to see the return of the god. This little girl probably didn't know the rules of meeting Mother Earth. Mother Earth could only be met once. If she was unlucky enough to meet Mother Earth for the second time, she would have to pay the price with blood. Her life would be left here, unless she moved her body slightly and pulled out a blood-stained root. She dipped her finger in the blood and put it in her mouth. That little demon's blood was also very good. It was very pure. Chapter 18:16. Ning Shuama came out and quickly returned to the Sea of Bones. Shui Lan was still sitting there, looking at the Sea of Bones. His back looked rather lonely. This guy was really meditating here. Was he not afraid that a monster would come out and eat him? She was in a good mood now, and Shui Lan was very pleasing to the eye. She deliberately walked over with heavy footsteps. It seemed that Shui Lan was indeed meditating. He only noticed her when she was almost beside him. He turned his head and said, Shuama, you are finally back. Yes, let's go back. Ning Shuama was full of joy that Shinjioli would return after 100 years. She did not notice Shui Lan's expression. Shui Lan looked at her shining eyes. There was a flash of sadness in his eyes, but he smiled gently. It seems that you have gained a lot. Ning Shuama's eyes curved into crescents as she hummed in agreement. She threw the box back to Shui Lan. Here, I've already asked for you. This flower is called. She told him about Mother Earth's introduction of this flower. Shui Lan frowned. He thought that the beautiful flower represented a kind of beauty, but he did not expect that, the more beautiful the flower, the more poisonous it was. He raised his hand, and a ball of fire ignited from the box. It burned into ashes in the blink of an eye. Ning Xuema was not surprised. It was better to burn such a disaster as soon as possible. Shui Lan handled it well. The sea of bones had completely returned to normal. If Ning Xuema and Shui Lan wanted to go back, they would have to go through it like before. Ning Xuema was eager to go back. Although there was no hourglass here, Ning Xuema had her own way of counting the time. Until now, she had been out for 2 days. She promised little Nianma that she would stay for 3 days. She had to go back on time to prevent the child from worrying. Shui Lan, I'll take the front this time. You cover the rear, Ning Xuema instructed. Okay. This time, Shui Lan agreed very quickly. It was rare that he didn't argue with her. He stood up. Probably because he had been sitting for too long, the moment he stood up, he staggered and fell onto Ning Xuema. He was still holding a sword in his hand. Coincidentally, the tip of the sword had cut Ning Xuema's arm. The cut was not light. Fresh blood flowed out and fell to the ground. You. Ning Xuema wasn't on guard against him at the moment, and her mind was completely focused on the sea of bones in front of her. That was why she was cut by him. She couldn't help but push him away and retreat 2 steps like flowing water. What are you doing? What kind of trick did this guy come up with this time? Shui Lan rubbed the space between his eyebrows and laughed carelessly. It's nothing. I sat for too long and my feet slipped. I didn't hurt you, did I? Ah, you're bleeding so much. He took 2 steps forward and used his foot to wipe the blood away, trying to erase the evidence. Ning Xuema. She looked at her arm. It was just a small cut. Shui Lan's sword wasn't poisonous. It seemed that he really had failed. Ning Xuema casually applied some medicine on her arm. She was a devil master, so her recovery abilities were strong. With the help of the medicine, her wound healed abnormally fast. A moment later, the wound had already healed and nothing could be seen. She felt that Shui Lan's behavior was a bit strange today. She couldn't help but glance at him. Shui Lan's complexion was not as pale as before. There was a bit of color in his face. When he saw Ning Xuema turn around to look at him, he smiled at her flirtatiously. Xuema, after going through so much, you still think I'm good-looking, don't you? Chapter 18-17. When he saw Ning Xuema looking back at him, he smiled and said, Xuema, after going through so much, you still think that I'm good-looking, don't you? Ning Xuema was speechless. She had the urge to kick him. She strode forward and said, Shui Lan, you can be more narcissistic. Shui Lan's eyes dimmed, but he quickly caught up with her and said with a smile, I'm just telling the truth. Ning Xuema ignored him. She held the sky splitter sword in her hand and injected her psychokinesis into it. An arc of fire appeared and slashed towards the black bones. The black bones all fell to the ground. Ning Xuema's figure leaped up, and she floated away. Shui Lan followed closely behind her. She was indeed the Devil Lord. Her power was much higher than Shui Lan's. Wherever her sword went, the black bones, no matter how hard and sharp they were all destroyed. Even the speed of regeneration was not as fast as before. The 2 of them had an easy journey. Shui Lan was more free this time, so he was in the mood to chat with Ning Xuema. Xuema, will Shinjioli come back to life? How did you know that I came here to ask about his resurrection? Ning Xuema asked. Was there a need to ask? He could guess. Other than Shinjioli, who else could make her so desperate? I guessed. Seeing that you look so relaxed, it seems that he will come back. Yes, he will come back. He is a god, so this world must have a master, Ning Xuema replied. Shui Lan, who was behind her, paused. Aren't you the master of heaven and earth? Ning Xuema was stunned. She felt as if she had been hit on the head. What? Only then did Shui Lan realize his slip of the tongue. He smiled and said, "I was just joking. You are the devil master. You are only the master of the monster realm and devil realm. You are not the master of the 6 realms. That's right, how could I possibly be the master of heaven and earth? I'm just a devil master, I can't replace him." The Ning Shuama also chimed in, seemingly trying to convince Shui Lan as well as himself. "I'm different from him, I'm different from him. That's right, Mother Earth said he could be reborn after 100 years. If I can replace him, he won't be able to be reborn after 100 years. This shows that I can't replace him." Fortunately, Shui Lan understood what she was saying. He didn't say anything behind her back. "Hey, Shui Lan, do you understand?" Ning Shuama was eager to find an agreement. "Understood, understood. Then do you agree with what I said?" "Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Shuama is the smartest, you can even straighten out such a complicated logical relationship." Shui Lan's voice had a smile in it. Only then did Ning Shuama let out a sigh of relief. She was in a hurry to get out, so the sword in her hand danced even faster and more urgently. The black bones that filled the sky were swept far away by the blazing sword wind. Wherever the two of them passed by, it was as if a hurricane had blown past. Shui Lan looked at her from behind, and a hint of pain flashed past his eyes. "Shui Lan, what do you mean by heaven and earth being out of harmony, heavenly Tao being in chaos?" Because Ning Shuama didn't have memories from a very long time ago, she didn't know much about these kinds of things. Shui Lan seemed to be slightly unsettled, and he didn't say anything behind her. "Shui Lan?" Shui Lan finally answered, "Here. I'm asking you a question. What do you mean by heaven and earth being out of harmony, heavenly Tao being in chaos?" Shui Lan replied without thinking, "It's when there's an abnormality in heaven and earth, right? And it's an abnormality that can't be changed by human strength, for example, 2 suns appearing in the sky. As the saying goes, there can't be 2 suns in the sky." Chapter 18:18. Ning Shuama chuckled and said, "2 suns are nothing. There was once an era when there were 9 suns. The earth was in a drought, and the people had no way to make a living. 8 of them were shot down by the descendants, and only 1 was left. It was normal." Speaking of this, her heart seemed to be hit hard by something. A truth seemed to be coming to the surface. Could it be that the coexistence of Shinjioli and her was considered as a disharmony between heaven and earth? Chaos in the natural law? That was why the outbreak of Zisha was triggered? She and he couldn't coexist in this world? No way. He was a god, but she was the devil master. At most, the gods and the demons were opposing each other. It couldn't be considered that there were 2 suns in the sky. The outbreak of Zisha this time might be due to other reasons, and not because of the coexistence of Shinjioli and her. Besides, 50,000 years ago, she and Shinjioli had coexisted for a long time, and it didn't trigger Zisha or anything. Obviously, this was not the reason. However, why did Shinjioli have to die? She was temporarily confused, so she was a little slow in making a move. She was almost hit by a black bone that suddenly appeared. "Be careful." Shui Lan pulled out his sword in time from behind and pushed the black bone away for her. Ning Shuama finally came to her senses and was sweating. It was not the time to be absent-minded. It was not too late for her to go back to the ground and think about it slowly. She focused her mind again and rushed forward with Shui Lan. With her leading the way, their speed was much faster. Seeing that the other side was in sight, Ning Shuama breathed a sigh of relief. As long as she rushed for a few more minutes, she could leave this damn place. She didn't know what was going on, but this sea of bones always gave her an ominous illusion. She was eager to leave here, so she ran forward even faster. Finally, Ning Shuama stepped on the ground with 1 foot. And the unforeseen event happened in an instant. Suddenly, the wind behind her was as fast as lightning. It felt like there was a sudden downpour between heaven and earth. There was no sign in advance. Countless sharp whistle-like noises came from all directions. This voice came too fast, so fast that no one could react in time. From the corner of his eyes, Ning Xuema saw countless sharp black bones shooting towards him. They were so dense, and they were so close to each other that she didn't even have time to wave her sword to set up a light barrier to defend herself. She could only set up a barrier, unexpectedly, just as her fingers were forming a seal, her body was violently pushed. Her body flew out and landed on the shore. Almost at the same time, a series of popping sounds came from behind him, shocking him to the core. Ning Xuema's heart sank. She gritted her teeth and turned around. Her expression changed drastically. In the forest of the Black Bone Sea, a black serpent made of countless black bones drilled out. The spikes on its body were like swords, and Shui Lan was pierced by these spikes. His entire body was pierced by countless spikes, but not a single drop of blood flowed out from his body. However, his face quickly turned pale. The black snake was dragging him into the depths of the sea of bones. His pair of eyes looked at Ning Xuema. He opened his mouth and only spat out 2 words, "Take care." Ning Xuema's mind exploded, Shui Lan. Almost without thinking, she jumped up and directly flew onto the back of the black serpent. She slashed at the black serpent with her sword. She wanted to kill the black serpent first. The indestructible sky splitter sword slashed on the black serpent's body, but sparks flew out. Unexpectedly, it only cut off one of the spikes. It didn't cause any other damage to the black serpent. Instead, it retreated even faster into the depths of the sea of bones. Chapter 18-19. Go quickly. It's useless. Shui Lan finally spat out a few words. No, I must save you. Ning Xuema reached out and grabbed his hand, wanting to pull his body away from the bone spur. However, she didn't expect that Shui Lan's body had already become one with the bone spur. She tried to pull it out, but it didn't budge. Shui Lan, bear with it. Ning Xuema slashed the black bone beneath him with her sword. This time, she used all her strength. With a loud clang, she finally broke one of the bones. Shui Lan let out a muffled groan. His body trembled as if his bones were the ones being chopped. Half of the bone that was cut was still stuck in his body, and blood was flowing out from the wound, swoosh. The bone that was cut flew back in the blink of an eye and reconnected with the wound. How could this be? Ning Xuema was stunned. Xuema, don't waste your energy. Shui Lan spoke again, go quickly. No. Ning Xuema held his hand and didn't let go. She was thinking of all kinds of ways to save him while comforting him. Shui Lan, hold on, I will think of a way. Think about the Ice Jade Fairy who is still waiting for you to get married. You can't disappoint her, right? Shui Lan's face was already very pale, but when he heard the words Ice Jade Fairy, his lips curved up slightly. Ice Jade Fairy was very good, but he only had one woman in his heart. There was no room for a second woman. When he brought Ice Jade Fairy here, it was only to remove Ning Xuema's guard and allow him to stay by her side. He looked at her, Xuema, do you love me? Ning Xuema froze. Shui Lan smiled, if you don't love me, then let me go. Let go. How could he release Ning Xuema? Once she loosened her grip, he would lose his life. She took a deep breath and said, Shui Lan, listen to me. You're my friend. You always have been. I can't abandon my friends. I can't do that. Shui Lan's gaze landed behind her. She was standing in front of the black bone snake and had once again stepped into the black bone sea. Behind her, a giant hand made of black bones was slowly taking shape. Xuema, I don't want to be your friend. I only want to be your man. It's been like this for 3 lifetimes. So, if you don't love me, then let me go. Give me a release. Shui Lan's sword suddenly appeared in his hand. With a swoosh, the tip of the sword swept past his wrist. Ning Xuema was fully focused on dealing with the black bones. She didn't expect that he would break his own wrist. When she reacted, only his broken hand was left in her hand. Shui Lan. Ning Xuema's voice changed. She watched as the black-boned snake dragged him into the depths of the abyssal bone forest. Momo, I hope that I won't meet you again in my next life. Shui Lan's voice sounded. It was weak but clear. Ning Xuema's eyes turned red. She chased after him without caring about anything, but this time, the abyssal bone forest only gave way to the black-boned snake. When the black-boned snake passed by, the surrounding black bones immediately rushed over and blocked Ning Xuema's path. If Ning Xuema wanted to chase after him, she could only chop these black bones, but no matter how fast she chopped, she couldn't compare to the speed of the black snake retreating. She could only watch as Shui Lan's red figure went further and further away. The sun rises from the east, red clothes like fire. The spring flowers are gorgeous, the night is waning. Holding the beauty in my arms, my heart wavers. The past is hard to recall, the zither and zither are hard to reconcile. A sorrowful song came from the black-boned sea. Chapter 18:20. What he was singing was the song that Ning Xuema had heard before. Tears streamed down Ning Xuema's face, and she slashed at the black bones around her with all her might. Just as the song stopped, Shui Lan gave a long laugh. If you want to eat this sacrifice, I'm afraid it won't be so easy. Before the laughter ended, a loud bang was heard. The place where Shui Lan was at exploded, and a red fog rose up. That red fog flew in all directions, and wherever it went, those black bones seemed to be corroded by concentrated sulfuric acid, vanishing one after another. Ning Xuema only felt a wave of air rushing towards her, and it swept her to the shore like a whirlwind. Mother Earth of Mythical Fire Palace had her eyes lowered, and she seemed to be waiting for something. Suddenly, her body trembled, and she trembled a few times. She quickly pulled back a tree root that was stretched into the ground as if she was scalded by fire. The tip of the snake-like tree root was now in a mess, and fresh blood was flowing out. Damn it! She had fallen for that little demon's trick. She wanted to catch that devil master with a bit of God's bloodline, and not that little demon. That little demon seemed to know everything, and she actually smeared the devil master's blood on her feet, causing her, a black snake, to grab the wrong person. Since one of them was willing to sacrifice in place of another, she could not go and capture the demon lord anymore. What a pity. She had never truly tasted the flesh of a devil master, and it would definitely taste better than ordinary demons. She didn't expect to miss the opportunity just like that. Her blood-sucking, black snake-like tree root was still bleeding, and she trembled in pain. That little demon. That little demon had actually used her soul as a sacrifice to use such a killer move at the moment of her death. She had actually been injured as well. When the dust settled, a low growl came from the depths of the sea of black bones, and it gradually disappeared. The sea of black bones was slightly messy, and those black bones recovered slowly after being watered by the blood fog. They looked like they were in a mess. Meanwhile, that big red figure that had once followed beside her had disappeared, and he would never appear again. Shui Lan, she had only saved him once, and he had followed her for 3 lifetimes. He had missed her, wronged her, imprisoned her, but he had also protected her many times and saved her from danger many times. Even if he owed her, he had already paid her back. He loved her so much that it was like a moth flying into a flame. He loved her so much that he didn't care about anything else. She could treat him as her best friend, but she was unable to truly fall in love with him. In order to make him give up, she deliberately ignored him and provoked him. However, he had followed her without any complaints, and even died for her in the end. Shui Lan, I will avenge you. I won't let you die in vain. Ning Xuema stood on the shore and looked at the sea of black bones. Her face was pale, and her originally black eyes gradually turned red. In the end, they were as red as the morning sun. She had come this time to ask for help, so she did everything according to Mother Earth's rules. He cleared the level normally, asked questions normally, and returned normally. He didn't even use much mana. Little Nianma was still waiting for her at home. If it was not necessary, she did not want to cause any trouble. She only wanted to get the information that she wanted. However, she did not expect that she would lose her friend when she took the normal path. She was already lonely in this world, and she did not expect that she would lose her only friend today. Did she eat her friend? Then, she would let the other party get the retribution. For this, she would do whatever it took. She raised her head and let out a long howl. Her howl shook the surroundings, and even the black bones that were as dense as a forest of swords trembled. Chapter 18:21. She raised her head and let out a long howl. Her howl shook the surroundings, causing even the dense black bones to tremble. The Devil Lord's aura instantly erupted. Under extreme anger, her blood boiled, and the magic power in her body circulated rapidly. It gathered at a certain place. After a moment, it was as if a seal had been unlocked around her body. Suddenly, a golden red light burst out, illuminating the entire dark underground. Under the powerful aura, the black bones in the sea of black bones trembled and made a rustling sound. Some of the black bones automatically shrank back. Since they ate her friends, then they should all be buried together with her friends. Not a single one should be left alive. The sky splitter sword in Ning Shuima's hand shone brighter than the sun. With a swoosh, it was pushed towards the sea of black bones. Landslide and tsunami were not enough to describe the sound of the sea of black bones at this moment. There was a sentence recorded in the remnant of the demon god record. The great demon god war, heaven and earth were overturned, the sun and the moon sank, the mountains and rivers collapsed, and the three realms were overturned. Because it was too long ago, no one knew what kind of situation it was at that time. After Ning Shuima was reborn in this continent, she had always been low-key. However, within 3 years, she had swept through the 6 realms. She did not know how many real experts she had fought, but no one could win against her. If one wanted to make the 6 realms submit, they would only be empty words if they were not strong enough. After she was reborn, although she did not have the memories from 50,000 years ago, she still had more than half of the power that belonged to the Devil Lord. Although she could not remember the moves she used in the past, the magic power in her body was almost the same as before. She was like a dormant dragon. Once she was truly angered, the world would turn upside down. Half an hour later, the dense forest of black bones had all disappeared, leaving only a thick layer of black bones that could no longer be gathered together. It was like a broken wall after a hurricane. Ning Shuima stood in the middle of the pile of broken black bones. Her ruby-red eyes looked around the pile of broken bones. Where was the black snake that ate Shuilan? When she was destroying the black bone sea, she had already noticed the appearance of the black snake. It was the main culprit, so she would not let it go. She would skin that monster alive, grind its bones, and scatter its ashes as a sacrifice to Shuilan's soul in heaven. She destroyed all the black bones, but she didn't see the shadow of the black snake. Could it have burrowed into the ground? The corners of her lips curled up slightly as her eyes flashed with bloodthirsty killing intent. Nothing could get away unscathed after killing her friend. She would find that monster even if she had to dig 8 feet into the ground. The sky splitter sword flashed in the sky, and the glaring red light once again lit up the entire space. In Mythical Fire Palace, Mother Earth was currently enduring the pain to heal her injuries. She wouldn't get injured easily, and once she got injured, she wouldn't recover easily either. She closed her eyes slightly and slowly put down the tree root that she had pulled out. She hissed softly and the tree root silently drilled into the ground and swam towards the sea of bones. That sea of bones was both a barrier to stop the intruders and a place for her to absorb. Only there could her roots recover faster. That little demon. That scoundrel little demon. He actually dared to use such a ruthless method to hurt her, Mother Earth. It was a pity he was already dead, otherwise, she would have let that little demon have a taste of her methods. She had lived for so long, and no one dared to be so disrespectful to her. Chapter 18:22. So painful. The lower half of her legs were actually countless knotted tree roots. When she endured the pain, the tree roots that were coiled around the entire hall also extended and shrunk like squirming snakes. She was about to circulate her technique and meditate when she suddenly sensed something. She suddenly opened her eyes wide. She looked outside. There seemed to be flames surging into the sky. That fire wasn't an ordinary fire, it was the red lotus night fire that could burn everything. That fire was bright red and dazzling like gemstones. It was like the flames of a phoenix's nirvana, and it stung Mother Earth, who was used to the darkness. What was going on? Before she could come back to her senses, she heard a sound that was like a landslide or a tsunami. That sea of black bones was closely related to her, so if it was truly under attack, she would be able to sense it in time. Her sea of nutrients. Her eyes flashed with a sharp light. That little devil master actually dared to destroy her sea of nutrients. She originally couldn't hurt that little devil master because of her promise, but now that she had sent herself to provoke her, what was there to be polite about? She wanted to let this little girl know what it meant to not provoke someone she couldn't provoke. Her finger moved, and countless tree roots burst out from her body and burrowed into the ground. Pft! Bang! Swoosh! Countless strange sounds came from the bottom of her feet, and countless black snakes burrowed out from the ground. Every black snake was 7 to 8 yards tall, and every black snake looked similar to the one that had dragged away Shuailan. The only difference was in size. There were 17 to 18 of these black snakes that had appeared, and they surrounded Ningshuama in the center. Violent killing intent spread out from these snakes, and it seemed like they were going to freeze everything in the surroundings. Had she poked the snake's nest? Ningshuama narrowed her eyes, and that pair of gemstone-like eyes revealed a bloodthirsty ruthlessness. Then let's get rid of them all in one go. Heaven's splitter sword in her hand burst into flames again, and she rushed towards the snake that was closest to her. That snake wasn't afraid of this. To be honest, it wasn't afraid of anything. In this world, apart from explosions made from soul power, no other weapon, no matter how sharp, would be able to harm them. Those who could break through so many obstacles and come to her Lifefire Palace were all extraordinary characters. The reason why they obeyed her rules was because her strength was extremely shocking. No one could truly contend against her. The main perverted rule of Mother Earth was that a person could only ask her a question once in their lifetime. Once they came for the second time, it meant that they were willing to be her food. There was also a price to pay for asking questions for the first time. For example, when crossing that sea of black bones, 1/3 of one's blood would be sucked away. Mother Earth's perverted rule that he could only come once was usually explained when he was about to leave. Therefore, for those who had come here once, as long as they didn't meet a huge problem that they couldn't solve, they wouldn't come here again. Ningshuama had come here once 50,000 years ago, but she didn't have the memories from 50,000 years ago, so she came here recklessly. She didn't know that this was her second time here, and she also didn't know that in Mother Earth's eyes, she was already her food. Those people who came for the second time weren't willing to be food, and they would usually fight to the death for a while. However, no one could defend against the attacks of the black snakes, and they all became food in Mother Earth's mouth. Chapter 1823. When Mother Earth hunted for food, she usually only needed to use one black snake. Yet this time, she had sent out all of them, which showed how much importance she placed on Ningshuama. Of course, she was determined to win. The flesh and blood of the Devil Master, she had always been waiting to taste it. Ningshuama naturally didn't know the inside story. At this moment, she still didn't know that Mother Earth was the one behind all this. She also didn't know that these black snakes were actually the tentacles that Mother Earth had stretched into the ground. Heaven's splitter sword appeared, and flames rose up, lighting up the entire space. The black snake danced wildly, and countless black bones burst out from its body. They were like sharp arrows that shot towards Ningshuama. Ningshuama narrowed her eyes and didn't dodge. Sword light swirled around her to form a huge ball of flames, and when those black bones shot into the huge ball of flames, they gave off sizzling sounds and vanished without a trace in the blink of an eye. The speed of the huge ball of flames didn't decrease, and it directly crashed into the body of the black snake in the lead. A world-shaking explosion rang out, and a huge hole was blown open in the body of the black snake that couldn't be harmed by anything. Chirp! That black snake gave off an ear-piercing cry, and countless black bones poured out from that huge hole. Those black bones were different from normal black bones. They were all dyed in blood, and the air was filled with the fishy smell of blood. That injured black snake seemed to have been struck by lightning, and it plunged back into the ground with a plop, disappearing in the blink of an eye. The other black snakes seemed to have discussed it beforehand, and they suddenly spread out in all directions, surrounding Ning Shuama from 8 directions. Without waiting for her to make a move, every black snake shot out countless black bone arrows, and they attacked Ning Shuama from all directions without any blind spots. This kind of black bone was extremely poisonous, and as long as one of them pierced Ning Shuama, her nerves would instantly be paralyzed, and she would lose all ability to move. She would then be at their mercy. If one looked down from the sky from afar, you would see over a dozen tall monsters surrounding a petite girl like an iron wall. The black bone arrows that were shot out were densely packed, and they poured towards Ning Shuama like a tsunami. They could drown her 800 times. Shwa! A dazzling red light that resembled the morning sun lit up once again. It was like a sun rising from the vast darkness. In the middle of the sun was the little girl. The sun moved extremely quickly, and like a flash of lightning, it rushed towards one of the black snakes. When the black bone arrows hit the sun, they sounded like raindrops falling to the ground, but they couldn't stop the sun from moving. The sun crashed into another black snake. Another ear-piercing screech rang out. Just like the first black snake, a large bloody wound appeared on its body, and it drilled into the ground and disappeared. That sun didn't stop, and it crashed into another snake that was next to it. Just like that, one after another, the black snakes were injured and burrowed back into the ground. The last 3 black snakes probably knew that they wouldn't be able to take advantage of the situation. Without waiting for the sun to crash into them, they also drilled into the ground. You want to run? How could it be that easy? Ning Shuama leaped into the air. Her movements were as fast as lightning as she followed the last snake. Mother Earth was about to cry from the pain. Her tentacles that had always been successful were all defeated. She would tremble for a while if one of her tentacles was injured, but now, she had injured 17 to 18 of them. She simply didn't know which one to stop the pain first. The martial arts of that little devil master were simply too out of her expectations. 50,000 years ago, when this little devil master came to her, he was still extremely innocent, and his martial arts weren't so terrifyingly high. Chapter 1824. How did her abilities become so high after not seeing her for 50,000 years? More importantly, a pure devil could actually execute the moves of a god. This was why Mother Earth had kicked an iron plate. She wasn't stupid either. After her tentacles got injured one after another, she knew she couldn't use them to harm Ning Shuama anymore, so she pulled them all back. Forget it, she wasn't going to eat the devil master's flesh anymore. She would let that little girl off this time. That little girl probably didn't know these black snakes were her tentacles, so she could go and mess around in the sea of black bones. Anyway, when the tentacles were pulled back, the earth and rocks would automatically bury the places where the tentacles passed by, so there wouldn't be any traces left underground. That little devil master wouldn't be able to find this place either. Murderous aura. Murderous aura that was like a tidal wave suddenly poured out from underground. With a flash of red light, a person flew up from underground and floated in midair of the hall. Mother Earth's expression changed, and countless tree roots swirled around her body, protecting her tightly. Ning Shuama looked down at Mother Earth from above and looked at everything in the surroundings. She instantly understood everything. You are the one who caused my friend's death. She gently spat out a few words. Her voice was indifferent as though she was telling a plain fact. She was clearly wearing fiery red clothes that floated in the air like a burning fire. However, the aura around her body was extremely cold. That was an extremely cold pressure that caused the temperature in the hall to plummet. It was as though the warm mountains and warm waters of Jiangnan had fallen to the North Pole with howling cold winds. Her aura made Mother Earth, who was used to seeing great winds and waves, suddenly feel a chill in her heart. Those who come to see me for the second time have to stay behind to be my sacrificial offering. This is my rule. He replaced you as the sacrificial offering, that's why I let you go. Mother Earth opened her mouth, and her voice was also cold. She had lived for God knows how many years longer than Ning Xuema, so the aura around her body was naturally extremely strong. She was neither a demon nor a god. Because she lived deep underground and did not participate in the disputes of the 6 realms, very few people knew about her. However, she was the creator of this continent after all. Naturally, her aura of a ruler was also very strong. It was not inferior to Ning Xuema's. Both of their auras erupted at the same time. Even before they clashed, the great hall of the Lifire Palace already couldn't endure the pressure. Cracking sounds rang out, and if it wasn't for the intertwined tree roots, the walls would have already collapsed. Seeing that someone has already become a sacrifice, I'll let you off this time. Hurry up and leave. Don't make me regret it. Mother Earth threatened. After all, she had lived for so many years, and her intuition was still very sharp. She knew that Ning Xuema was a strong opponent when she confronted her. If they really fought, it would be hard to say who would emerge victorious. The most important thing was that the longer a person lived, the more afraid they would be of death. Therefore, Mother Earth was also afraid of death. She didn't really want to fight with her life on the line. She still wanted to live well and continue to be the supreme ruler of this world. Therefore, when she saw Ning Xuema, her first thought was to scare her away. Meanwhile, Ning Xuema only smiled at her threat. You want to let me off? But I don't want to let you off. You have to pay with your life for killing someone. Mother Earth, you have to pay with your life for my friend this time. The smile of this red-clothed little devil master was very sweet, and there was a dimple on one side of her face. However, there was no smile in her eyes at all. Her pupils had already gradually turned into a demonic purple. It was an intense and cold purple. Her pupils were vertical and deep, and when one took a look, their heart would also feel like it was frozen. The words she spoke were like ice blades that gave off an incomparably cold aura. Chapter 1825. Mother Earth's heart turned cold again. You are courting death. Indeed. Ning Xuema smiled again. I want to send you death. Before she could finish her sentence, Heaven Splitter sword appeared in her palm again. She lowered her head and blew gently on the tip of the sword. Her posture was devilish and beautiful, yet it made people tremble with fear. Now that she had said this, Mother Earth also knew that there was going to be a bloody battle. Very good, since you're courting death, don't blame me. Mother Earth narrowed her eyes and suddenly waved her palm outwards. Countless black lights burst forth from her body and flipped in the air, transforming into black souls. These souls were densely packed together and formed a black sea that was like a wave. They swept towards Ning Xuema. Soul weapons. Furthermore, they were soul weapons with immense resentment and extremely strong abilities. Ning Xuema's eyes narrowed slightly and she suddenly sneered. This Mother Earth looked like an expert that stood aloof from worldly affairs, but she was actually such a cruel and cunning person. She had been living underground like a groundhog for tens of thousands of years. She had killed countless people, and those who had died here were all turned into soul weapons by her secret techniques. These people were all overlords when they were alive, and now that they had died here silently, their souls couldn't be released, so their resentment was naturally immense. Now that they were released by Mother Earth using her secret technique, they couldn't wait to tear apart everything that was alive. There was a barrier around Mother Earth that controlled them, so they naturally couldn't harm her. Therefore, they went straight for Ning Xuema. She was the only living creature here other than Mother Earth. Therefore, they wanted to tear her apart. The screams of the ghosts were as sharp as knives, and all Ning Shuama could see were all kinds of human heads that were rushing towards her. Their faces still had the appearance of when they were alive. There were ugly and handsome, male and female, and they were densely packed like a huge tide as they flooded towards her from all directions. Ning Shuama's expression changed slightly. She wasn't afraid of these soul weapons, but she was afraid that there was someone she was familiar with among them. Would Shui Lan also be among them? Because of this concern, she couldn't unleash the kind of large-scale attack that could truly kill a spirit soul. She could only attack from a small area. After making sure that there was no one around, she finally made her move. Mother Earth was still too careless. She thought that because she had the soul weapon tied, she would be able to kill gods and Buddhas without fail. Perhaps this weapon of mass destruction could really deal with gods, but this time, she was dealing with devils. Demons were naturally immune to evil tricks, not to mention that the other party was the spiritual leader of the demons, the Devil Lord. If it wasn't for the fact that Ning Shuama was wary of these soul weapons, they wouldn't be able to threaten her at all. The crimson sword light was like a meteor shower, slashing on the bodies of the soul weapons. The murderous heaven sword was formed by the accumulation of the heaven and earth's murderous chi. The murderous chi of these soul weapons paled in comparison to the murderous chi of the murderous heaven sword. Cries of agony could be heard in the palace. The karmic fire of the red lotus that emerged from the sky splitter sword was the bane of these soul weapons. Balls of soul weapons dissipated in the karmic fire of the red lotus and turned into nothing. Mother Earth had a total of 3,000 soul weapons, and when they were gathered together, even a spit from one of them could drown a person to death. Furthermore, these soul weapons all had extremely strong abilities. Furthermore, Ning Shuama was afraid that Shui Lan's soul would pounce over by mistake, so she didn't dare to set up a fire barrier that could block these soul weapons. Her defense was completely dependent on the dancing of the sky splitter sword. Chapter 1826. In this way, it was hard to avoid oversights. Furthermore, during this period of time, Mother Earth's black snake-like roots would attack her from time to time. Therefore, Ning Shuama still suffered some injuries. She got a sword in her chest, a knife in her back, and even a spear in her abdomen. The blades of these soul weapons all contained poison of the soul, and if it was an ordinary immortal or devil, they would probably be sent to meet the gods. Blood soaked her clothes, but Ning Shuama didn't even bat an eyelash. She moved to and fro among the soul weapons, and wherever the sword light passed, there would be cries of pain. None. The soul of Shui Lan wasn't among the soul weapons that she destroyed. As the number of soul weapons decreased, her moves also became faster and faster. 2 hours passed, and when there were only 100 to 200 soul weapons left, Ning Shuama could already take a look at them all. There was no Shui Lan. She seemed to be disappointed and relieved at the same time. Heaven Splitter Sword flew into the sky again, and it split into several hundred swords in an instant. They flew towards the remaining soul weapons like flowing lights. Cries of ghosts and howls of wolves reverberated through the entire space, and black blood splattered down. Mother Earth's perfect killing weapon was destroyed by Ning Shuama just like that. Destroyed. Mother Earth's heart ached so much that she almost pulled it out. However, she couldn't care about her heartache now. She was Mother Earth, she was born here and grew up here. Even though her magic power was high, she couldn't move. In other words, she couldn't run even if she wanted to. She saw the Heaven Splitter Sword in Ning Shuama's palm flying up to attack the remaining soul weapons, and she steeled her heart. Countless black snake roots whipped towards Ning Shuama. It was obvious that she was bullying her because her weapon was temporarily out of her hand, and she couldn't protect herself. This was her only chance to kill Ning Shuama, so she didn't want to miss it. The black snakes danced wildly and pounced towards Ning Shuama, wanting to turn her into a porcupine. Mother Earth thought Ning Shuama would set up a barrier to block it, and her roots could break any barrier, so Ning Shuama couldn't avoid being killed. However, he did not expect that Ning Shuama had no intention of setting up a wizardry barrier at all. She did not even resist. Her figure flashed like lightning and she pounced on a black snake. She grabbed the black bone spikes on the black snake's body and pulled with all her might. Mother Earth let out a world-shaking scream. Ning Shuama actually tore the black snake tree root into two. Mother Earth's body twitched from the pain, and before she could do anything, a red light flashed in front of her eyes. That little girl in red had already pounced in front of her, and Heaven's Splitter sword light spat out a red light that was a foot long as it swept towards Mother Earth's neck. Mother Earth was scared out of her wits. In a moment of desperation, he blocked Ning Shuama's sword with his hand. "You can't kill me. If I die, the God-fiend continent will be destroyed." The crimson sword pierced through her hand and stopped a few centimeters away from her neck. The scorching sword breath churned around Mother Earth's neck, giving her goosebumps. It also destroyed her usual dignified image. She couldn't care about anything else. She didn't even care that one of her hands had been sliced into two. She hurriedly said, "I'm Mother Earth, I'm in charge of the essence of the entire God-fiend continent. If I die, the mountains will crumble, and everyone on this continent will die with me." "Is that so?" Ning Shuama's lips curled up slightly, and that was a bloodthirsty smile. "But what does that have to do with me?" Mother Earth choked, and only then did she remember that the other party was a devil. How could a devil care about the life and death of everyone? Ning Shuama's treasure sword moved forward another half an inch, and her smile became colder. "I'll count to 3, I hope you can give me a reason not to kill you, otherwise." Chapter 1827. Ning Shuama's sword moved forward another half an inch, and her smile became colder. "I'll count to 3, and I hope you can give me a reason not to kill you. Otherwise." She had to force this she-male to hand over Shui Lan's soul. However, if she asked for it directly, Mother Earth would use it as a threat, and who knew how much trouble she would cause. Therefore, she had to force her to hand it over herself. Shui Lan's corporeal body was gone, but if she could get his soul back, she could send him to reincarnate again. She could even use his soul to condense his body and think of a way to revive him. She wasn't willing to let him die like this. Mother Earth's face was deathly pale. The black snake tentacles on her body were all injured, and they were all twitching. She wanted to turn one around and attack Ning Shuama from behind, but she couldn't do it. Originally, it was others who were the meat on her chopping board, but now it was her turn to be the meat on someone else's chopping board. The more afraid of death a person was, the easier it was for them to lose and die when they were truly fighting with their lives on the line. Her martial arts were actually about the same as Ning Shuama's, or even slightly higher, but she was afraid of death. On the other hand, Ning Shuama was famous for not being afraid of death. Furthermore, her battle experience was miles ahead of Mother Earth's. Once she fought with her life on the line, even those several levels higher than her would have to admit defeat. Those who were afraid of death would only lose when they met those who fought with their lives on the line. At this moment, under Ning Shuama's coercion, Mother Earth's body trembled like a sieve. "I'm not lying to you, once I die, this world will really collapse. You might not be afraid because you are the Devil Master, but don't you have friends and family? They will also die." Before she could finish, the tip of Ning Shuama's sword had already touched the fine flesh on her neck. "You really haven't learned your lesson. I already said that even if this world collapses, I won't care." The tip of the sword entered her flesh, and a thread of blood flowed out. It was clearly just a scratch, but Mother Earth was so frightened that her face turned deathly pale. "You don't. What did you say you wanted? Or what do you want to know? If I have it, I will definitely tell you everything I know. Where is my friend's soul? Hand him over first." Ning Shuama coldly stated her first condition. Mother Earth was stunned, and her eyes flickered. "You care about him so much?" In that case, she could use this as an excuse to fight for a chance of survival. How smart was Ning Shuama? One look at Mother Earth's expression and Earth knew what she was going to do. She smiled and said softly, "What do you think? I can kill my own people, but if someone else kills them, it will make me very unhappy. Of course, it doesn't matter if you don't hand it over. It's the same if I make you pay with your life. He is a demon king and you are Mother Earth, using your life to repay his is enough." She blinked her eyes again and smiled even more gently. "Forget it, you don't have to hand it over. I'll just kill you." She exerted force with the sword in her hand. "Wait!" Mother Earth shouted, and she didn't dare to keep him in suspense anymore. "Devil Master, it's not that I don't want to hand him over, it's just that his soul really isn't with me. Before he died, he used soul explosion technique, so I'm afraid his soul has already dispersed." Ning Xuema's expression changed. Soul dispersed? His soul had been destroyed again. "I don't believe it." Ning Xuema said word by word. "You are really not obedient. You still dare to play tricks in such a situation." Her treasure sword suddenly flashed, and half of Mother Earth's ear was gone. Mother Earth was almost paralyzed from fear, and she said anxiously, "No. Definitely not." Chapter 1828. Mother Earth was almost paralyzed from fear, and she said anxiously, "No. Definitely not. I can swear that what he used then was the soul explosion technique, otherwise, my leg wouldn't have been injured." Looking at Mother Earth's expression and words, she didn't seem to be lying. Ning Xuema's fingers that were holding the sword turned cold, and ruthlessness flashed past her purple eyes. "In that case, you will have to pay the price. Your soul will scatter, right? I know this technique as well." "No, no. How about this? I can't hand over your friend, how about I answer some questions that you are interested in?" Mother Earth was anxious to live, so she tried her best to negotiate. "I don't seem to be interested in anything else." Ning Xuema's voice was indifferent. "Don't you want to know the exact origin of the purple fiend? Don't you want to know what is the disorder of heaven and earth, the chaos of the heavenly Tao?" Ning Xuema looked at her with an indifferent gaze. "I feel that this has nothing to do with me. Furthermore, how do I know if you are lying? I might be wrong in the way I do things, but I never lie. I can't lie when it concerns the heavenly Tao." Mother Earth was just short of swearing. Ning Xuema's gaze drooped slightly. These were indeed what she was concerned about, because these might be the key to why Shinjioli had to leave. Tell me about it first." Her tone was indifferent, but her heart was slightly raised. "You let go of me first." Mother Earth saw that she had the intention to move, so she immediately made a request. "I asked you to tell me, I just wanted to hear it for the time being. If I'm satisfied with what you say, I might spare your life. However, it's still too early to let you go now." Ning Xuema naturally wouldn't let her go. If she let her go, it wouldn't be easy to catch her again, and she would have to spend more effort. Ning Xuema's injuries weren't light, and the wounds on her body were very painful. However, she had always been resilient, so no matter how painful it was, she could endure it. She even didn't show it on the surface, as though she couldn't feel any pain. In order to survive, Mother Earth had no choice but to reveal the origin of the purple fiend under the pressure of Ning Xuema's treasure sword. To Ning Xuema, her words were no less shocking than a clap of thunder. His heart sank to the bottom of the earth. A long time ago, the Divine Demon Continent wasn't called the Divine Demon Continent. Instead, it was called the Six Realms Continent. The living beings of the six realms only believed in one God. This God was created by heaven and earth and was in charge of the general balance of the six realms. He would not be biased towards any one realm and was worshipped as the master of heaven and earth. In other words, he was the master of all six realms. However, at some point in time, there was a deviation in heaven and earth, and another devil was born. As the demon grew stronger, he became known as the Demon Master. Slowly, he became as powerful as a supreme god and became the master of the three realms. The Six Realms continent changed its name to the Divine Demon Continent. There can't be two suns in the sky, and there can't be two lords in the people. In fact, the Six Realms continent only needed one lord. Once there were two lords, the order of the world would be reversed, and the purple evil would begin to breed. Of course, if the gods and devils simply coexisted, even if the purple evil started to breed, it wouldn't cause any harm. However, the gods and devils were born to be opposites. Once the gods and devils fell in love, it would be the true calamity of the Six Realms. The purple evil would grow rapidly, and one of the gods and devils would have to disappear. Otherwise, the purple evil would explode in a short period of time and destroy the Six Realms. The only way to seal the purple evil was to sacrifice one of the gods and devils. Only then could the balance of the Six Realms continent be maintained. Chapter 1829. After Mother Earth finished her explanation, her eyes stared at Ning Xuema's face. 50,000 years ago, Devil Master came to find me once to ask for advice on how to chase after a man. If I'm not wrong, little Devil Master wanted to chase after Venerable God then. Ning Xuema didn't say anything. She didn't have the memories from 50,000 years ago, so she naturally didn't know if Mother Earth was right or wrong. However, she seemed to be very pure and straightforward 50,000 years ago. To find a way to chase after a man, she would go through so much trouble to find Mother Earth. These were all secondary. What gave Ning Xuema the heaviest blow was that only one of her and Shinjiuli could live. Her mind was blown, and she pursed her lips tightly. She said coldly, "I don't believe it. Why can't gods and devils love each other? What kind of broken rule is this? Why haven't I heard of it before?" 50,000 years ago, the Six Realms were completely destroyed, and only a few of them survived. Even if they did, they probably lived in seclusion. Naturally, no one knows about this rule anymore. Mother Earth's gaze moved around Ning Xuema's face. If I'm not wrong, you haven't recovered your memories from 50,000 years ago, so you naturally don't know about this rule. Ning Xuema raised her eyebrows. Who set this rule? Could it be Venerable God? Mother Earth shook her head. No, it's Heavenly Tao. Heavenly Tao? What the hell is that? Ning Xuema sneered. Wasn't Venerable God the earliest master of the Six Realms? Shouldn't he be the one to set these rules? Mother Earth said, no matter how powerful gods and devils are, they are born from heaven and earth. Naturally, they have to follow the rules of Heavenly Tao. Ning Xuema shook her head. I don't believe it. Then where can I see Heavenly Tao? Mother Earth lowered her eyes. Heavenly Tao isn't in the Six Realms. When something goes against Heavenly Tao will give a warning and appear automatically. I believe that Venerable God has seen it before. I've seen it before too. This was too illusory. Ning Xuema lifted her chin with her sword and looked down at her. Are you trying to lie to me? Mother Earth's eyes didn't flicker with a hint of guilt. I'm not lying. You don't have to think about what happened 50,000 years ago. Think about what happened recently. That Supreme God once came to me to ask for advice on how to cure the Devil Lord's chronic illness and how to restore his memory. He must have fallen in love with you back then. However, at that time, he had not yet entered the Fantian Palace to recover his memories as a divine venerable, nor had he regained his divine position. How did he treat you after he regained his godhood? When did the purple evil break out this time? How was it sealed? If I'm not wrong, that supreme divinity is no longer in this world, right? Only then did the Six Realms return to normal. Ning Xuema's face turned pale, and he couldn't answer Mother Earth's question. After pausing for a while, she sneered as if she had suddenly grasped at a life-saving straw. I think Your Excellency might have forgotten. Since you said that only one of us could live, then why did you tell me that he would be reborn in 100 years? Mother Earth sighed. That's because I thought Your Excellency would die here and become my blood food. Once you, the devil master, die, heaven and earth would need a normal master. Venerable God would naturally be reborn. However, since you are still alive, Venerable God won't reappear in this world. Ning Shuama, legend has it that there's a kind of flower on the Yellow Springs Road called the Permitha flower. There's a saying in the Buddhist scriptures, the Permitha flower blooms for 1,000 years, withers for 1,000 years, and the flowers and leaves will never meet again. Love isn't karma, fate determines life and death. Chapter 1830. Spider lilies, flowers and leaves will never meet again, their fates would be like this spider lilies. If he lived, she would die. If he died, she would live. They loved each other, but they would never meet again. Ning Shuama didn't know how she walked out of mythical fire palace. Her heart was heavy, but her legs were light. She couldn't step on solid ground. She didn't execute Mother Earth. After all, this person's life and death would affect the survival of the entire God-Devil continent. Shinjioli had once protected this continent, and he might be reborn on this continent in the future. She didn't want him to see a barren and dead continent like Mars when he returned. She didn't care about the life and death of other people, but her son was still living on this continent. She couldn't let anything happen to her son, of course. Ning Shuama also didn't want to let go of the culprit who had killed Shui Lan so easily, so she just crippled all of Mother Earth's skills and chopped off her 2 arms and 16 black snake-like tree roots. She barely managed to keep her alive to linger on at death's door. Ning Shuama used Heaven's Splitter Sword to do this. There was poison in Heaven's Splitter Sword, and it was an incurable poison. Back then, even with Shinjioli's great abilities, he still couldn't heal himself. Therefore, Ning Shuama believed this Mother Earth wouldn't be able to do evil anymore. She should live her life desperately trying to detoxify herself. She could be considered to have taken revenge for Shui Lan. Ning Shuama's mind was in a mess. She had once questioned Mother Earth about the coexistence of gods and devils, and Mother Earth had laughed evilly. If you can't coexist, you have to give up your identity as the Devil Master completely. Ning Shuama wasn't interested in the identity of the Devil Master. If she didn't become the Devil Master, Shinjioli would be able to return. In that case, she would give up the identity of the Devil Master without a second word. Therefore, when her eyes lit up, she didn't expect Mother Earth's next sentence to send her back to hell. You are a devil born from heaven and earth. This Devil Master identity isn't something you can give up just because you want to. You still need to make a complete sacrifice. Ning Shuama naturally asked what kind of sacrifice she needed to make, but Mother Earth didn't say anything no matter what. Ning Shuama tortured her thoroughly, but she refused to say anything more. She was forced to say, "This is the real God's secret. If I say it out loud, my soul will suffer the calamity of heavenly punishment and will never be free." Therefore, she would rather die in Ning Shuama's hands at this time than suffer the pain of eternity. Ning Shuama swayed as she walked out of Lifefire Palace for the second time. Mother Earth looked at her back view from behind, and her eyes were filled with resentment and delight. She still had one more important thing that she hadn't told this little Devil Master. That was, if she died or made a complete sacrifice, even if God was reborn, the reborn God might not be the same God as before. Therefore, it was impossible for her to see her lover again. She was destined to be alone for the rest of her life. Unless that God used some kind of heaven-defying magic to turn things around, the miserable ending of this little Devil Master was already destined. The hope of 100 years had become a bubble, and even the promise of 1,000 years had become uncertain. Her lover was dead, and so was her friend. The 2 people who originally occupied the largest part of her life had now disappeared. She was the only one left in this world. If it wasn't for little Nyenma in her heart, she almost wanted to be buried in this dark underground and never come out again. When she finally returned to the surface, the sky outside was already completely dark. The green mountains and clear water, the blue sky and white clouds, and the moon was waning. Chapter 1831. Green mountains, clear water, blue sky, white clouds, a waning moon. From now on, she would be the only one enjoying the scenery, no one would accompany her to watch the clouds roll by. The place she came out from was at the foot of the mountain, and coincidentally, it was the place where she and Shui Lan had barbecued their game. Now, the traces of the barbecue were still there, but that man would never return. She stood on the spot for a while and looked up at the sky in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking about. She also didn't know how long she was in a daze when there seemed to be some movement behind her. She subconsciously turned back and saw a woman in white floating not far away. Her beautiful face was slightly pale, and a pair of ink-black eyes were looking at her. Fairy Ice Jade. Why was she here? Fairy Ice Jade walked over, but she didn't look at Ning Xuema. Instead, she looked at the ground under her feet and asked softly, "Is he dead?" Ning Xuema froze, because of this girl's sharp senses. "Why do you ask? Could this Fairy Ice Jade know some inside information?" Fairy Ice Jade still didn't look at her as she stared at the ground beneath her feet. After a while, she opened her mouth and said, "I drank with him for 3 days. He got drunk, and every time he got drunk, he would talk about you, Ning Xuema." Fairy Ice Jade continued, "Sometimes, I would change the topic for him, but he would try his best to bring it back. It was as if he was possessed, crying and laughing one moment. He said he was a fool, he said he was poisoned by your goo and couldn't let go no matter what. He said he wanted to let go, but he couldn't do it. He said he would probably only be free if he died." Ning Xuema's fingers turned cold, and she said hoarsely, "You don't have to say any more." How could she not know about Shui Lan's deep feelings for her? However, she couldn't respond. Fairy Ice Jade seemed to have opened up a chatterbox. "He has been paying attention to your movements these few days, and he knew you were going to find Mother Earth. He was afraid you would get into an accident, so he followed you secretly." Ning Xuema's heart ached like she was drowning, and she closed her eyes slightly. When she opened them again, they were already clear. "He knows this is the second time I'm finding Mother Earth?" He didn't mention it, but judging from his demeanor, he seems to have this suspicion. "He didn't tell me earlier." Along the way, Shui Lan didn't mention anything about meeting Mother Earth for the second time. "If he had told you and let you know the dangers involved, would you still have gone?" Ice Jade Fairy asked. Ning Xuema paused for a moment before she finally answered, "I will." Her trip to the underground world was imperative, so it didn't matter whether she knew about this rule or not. The difference was that if she had known about this rule, she wouldn't have let Shui Lan follow her no matter what. She would have searched for a breakthrough underground and dealt with Mother Earth herself. Shui Lan probably understood this as well, so he chose not to say anything. He chose to stay by her side and become the sacrifice instead of her. He used his own method to protect her, just like how she had agreed to take him in as a guard in her first life, and he had personally promised to protect her for the rest of his life, until the end of his life. Shui Lan used a tragic stroke to draw an end to his own life, and he had also left an indelible mark in her heart. The cold stars flickered in the sky, the cool breeze was still the same, and the bright moon was still the same. However, the person who left would never return. The only person in this world who could save the person whose soul had been scattered was no longer in this world, and Shui Lan naturally wouldn't reincarnate, much less return. Chapter 1832. The Divine Lord, the only person in this world who could save the soul of a person, was no longer in this world. Naturally, Shui Lan would not be reincarnated, and he would not come back. There was a rush of blood in her chest, and there was a sweet taste in her throat. Ning Xuema staggered a little. The wounds on her body had been treated, so it was not obvious on the surface. Ice Jade Fairy could not tell either. Ice Jade Fairy stood there and slowly took out some fruits and snacks. She also took out a gourd of wine and opened the gourd. She smiled at the sky. "Elan, let me toast you. This is your favorite wine, your favorite fruits, and snacks." Her voice was slightly hoarse. It sounded like she was crying and laughing at the same time. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. She finally noticed that Ice Jade Fairy looked very haggard. She looked even more haggard than when she had just sealed Zisha. Have you been waiting for him here? She could not help but ask. Ice Jade Fairy did not look back, but her voice was dim. He has been waiting for you to come back, but I have been waiting for him to come back. She had been standing behind him, but he would never notice her. He only had eyes for his Momo. She knew that he would die this time, but she still waited here, hoping that a miracle would happen. However, the miracle did not happen. Shui Lan, the man who was as dazzling as fire, would never come back. He used his death to commemorate his love, and also to free himself. However, she could not be freed. She had chased after him for 2 lifetimes, but his eyes never stopped on her. The wine spilled on the ground, and the air was filled with the fragrance of the wine. Ice Jade Fairy looked at Ning Xuema. Do you want to have a drink? Ning Xuema shook her head lightly. I should go. She turned around and strode away. She knew that she might be too heartless in the eyes of Ice Jade Fairy, but she could not care less. If possible, she also wanted to get drunk to relieve her worries. She also wanted to get drunk in the wine town, away from the burning reality. However, she could not. Little Nianma was still waiting for her. She could not break her promise to the child. Ning Xuema finally rushed back to Fantian Palace before dawn. As soon as she entered the palace, before she could see the scenery inside, a small body threw itself into her arms like a cannonball. Mother! Ning Xuema was knocked back a step by him. She picked him up and looked at him in her arms. After not seeing him for 3 days, the little guy seemed to have lost a lot of weight. There were dark circles under his big eyes. It was obvious that he didn't sleep well these 3 days. The little guy hugged her neck tightly and cried, Mother, you scared me to death. I thought you would never come back. Ning Xuema had promised him 3 days. If he counted carefully, she should have come back last night, not at dawn the next day. Shen Nianma was probably traumatized. Although he had been waiting obediently in the Fantian Palace, he had been anxious. He was afraid that his mother would never return. Just like that, he waited and waited. On the 3rd day, seeing that the time promised by his mother had passed, his little heart sank again and again. He simply stood at the gate and stared anxiously. The sound of the wind blowing through the treetops was enough to make him jump up. He was very scared and wanted to cry, but he knew that crying was useless at a young age. The only thing he could do was to wait endlessly. Until Ning Xuema really came back and opened the gate of Fantian Palace, he was relieved and directly rushed to her. Until he fell into the familiar warm embrace, his little heart was really relieved. However, he still hugged her neck and did not let go. Chapter 1833. Ning Xuema naturally knew what her son was worried about. She felt as though her heart was being pricked by something. Her child was still young. She really did not have the ability to indulge her sadness. Any pain, any sadness, any blow, she had to swallow it all silently. Little Nianma had already lost his father. She could not let him lose his mother too. She kissed the child's face. Don't worry. Mother will come back. Just as she said that, she felt a tightness in her chest. There was a sweet taste in her throat, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, she turned her head in time and did not spray the blood on the child. Mother. Shen Nianma was frightened. It's okay. Ning Xuema tried to comfort him, but her vision suddenly turned black. Her legs went soft, and she lost consciousness. She was severely injured when she fought with Mother Earth, but she had been holding on. Originally, she should have immediately meditated to recover when she returned to the ground. However, she rushed back because she was afraid that Nianma would be worried. Coupled with the continuous mental blows, she finally could not take it anymore and fainted in front of her son. Before she fainted, the only thing she was thankful for was that she did not faint on the way back. Otherwise, little Nyenma would have cried to death waiting for her. She heard little Nyenma's voice. In a daze, she struggled to reply, "Mother. It's okay. Sleep. I will be fine after a sleep." Before she could finish the sentence, she completely fainted. The person in reality was no longer there. If she could see him from time to time in her dream, could she treat this dream as reality? Could she treat reality as just a nightmare? Ning Xuema saw Shinjiuli again in her dream. Moreover, she could still clearly understand that this was a dream, and it was an old story from 50,000 years ago. It was even a continuation of the previous dream. Ning Xuema deeply felt that this was not bad. It was equivalent to her re-experiencing the life of Shinjiuli in her dream. It was equivalent to another lifetime. This time, the perspective was still from the perspective of the devil master, Xuema. Xuema's hands were poisonous. She had scratched herself badly because of the allergic reaction. Her face was like a cat's, and she couldn't go out for a long time. She had the urge to smash the mirror. Although she was often injured, she was born and raised by the heavens. Her self-healing ability was extraordinarily strong. If she was stabbed today, she would be completely healed tomorrow. Only this time, even though she had been recuperating for half a month, the bloodstains on her face were still obvious. This made her a little anxious. Her subordinates told her that there was a type of herb in the Sea of Clear Skies that had miraculous effects on skin scratches, so she went there. What she didn't expect was that she would meet Shinjiuli there. Of course, these days, she was thinking about how to make him her husband. However, because of the ugly wound on her face, she didn't want to see him, but she still sent someone to deliver the flowers. Xuema was very tenacious in everything she did. Although her face couldn't be seen, she didn't lose much of her kung fu. She was still very capable. Every day, she would pick some specific flowers and send someone to deliver them to him. The person who was sent by her to deliver the flowers would come back hesitantly, saying that the flowers had been delivered. But often, when they saw the flowers again, they were the same as when they were sent. Other than being a little flat, the position of the bouquet didn't change at all. Of course, occasionally, the bouquet would disappear. The person who sent the flowers would happily come back to report to the Devil Master, saying that the supreme god of flowers should have received yesterday's flowers. Especially in recent days, the person who sent the flowers would always find that the flowers he sent yesterday had disappeared, so he was even happier when he reported to her. Chapter 1834. Xuema also felt that her painstaking efforts were not in vain. She had finally moved him. Perhaps if she worked harder, she would be able to embrace the supreme god. Then, she would be able to happily share a room with him and truly grow up. With this optimistic thought, she wanted her face to recover as soon as possible. Only then could she personally go to him to ask for his hand in marriage. The Sea of Clear Skies was the most beautiful sea in the 6 realms continent. The blue sky, the blue sea, and the golden moon hung in the sky. The sea waves were like colored glass, gently rippling under the moonlight. The most beautiful sea had the most ferocious beasts, tiger, fox, shark. The power of each shark was comparable to the top experts of the immortal and devil realms. They knew magic, could transform, and could even merge into the water. Once they got close to their prey, they would immediately launch all kinds of attacks, killing without leaving a trace. There were all kinds of strange herbs in the sea, but few people dared to pick them. This sea was called the Sea of Death. The kind of grass that Xuema wanted to pick grew on the continental shelf 100 meters under the sea. Xuema was good at fire attacks, but the beasts here were best at water attacks. Water countered fire, so she would be more restrained if she encountered the beasts here. Therefore, she made preparations in advance. She deliberately wore a tight waterproof suit. She couldn't use fire to attack the beasts here, so she could only use swordsmanship. Therefore, she sharpened her sword to the extreme. The scenery here was very beautiful, but she was not in the mood to enjoy the scenery. She stood above the sea and estimated that the water was about 100 meters deep. She was about to jump down. The sound of water splashing could be heard below, and a person slowly rose from the water. Black hair, silver clothes, dark blue eyes. When he appeared, he almost stole the light of the sun and the moon. Shinjioli. Although he emerged from the bottom of the sea, there was not a single drop of water on his body. His wide sleeves spread out in the sea breeze. His posture was not ordinary free and easy. This person seemed to have the ability to casually stand anywhere and create an excellent scenery. The moment Shuama saw him, her little heart could not help but beat faster. Shuama was still very confident. She immediately took a step forward and smiled brighter than the sun. Supreme God, what a coincidence. We meet again. If fate brings us together, we'll meet even if we're thousands of miles apart. This is really fate that can't be stopped. The moment Shinjioli saw her, he frowned slightly. He didn't say anything and just said, "What are you doing here? Did you follow me here?" She had really wronged her. Shuama immediately smiled brightly. Under the moonlight, a pair of small canine teeth shone brightly. "Jioli, you think too much. I'm here to pick herbs. I didn't expect to meet you here. This must be fate." Shinjioli glanced at her. He obviously did not feel anything for her bright and beautiful smile. He did not say anything and turned to leave. Shuama finally saw him. Naturally, she didn't want to let him go so easily. She flashed and blocked his way. "Jioli, have you received my flowers? Which one do you like? If you tell me, I can give you a special one." She had read in a novel that giving flowers was about sincerity. If you found out that the other party liked that kind of flower, you would give that kind to them. This was called catering to their preferences. Usually, when a beauty felt the sincerity of the person who gave her flowers, she would be excited and marry him. Shinjioli was more beautiful than a beauty. He might feel her sincerity and marry her in excitement. Then, they could sleep together. Her wish could come true. Chapter 1835. The smile on her face couldn't be more sincere, but Shinjioli had the urge to grab her and give her a good beating. What did she take him for? He was good at staying calm. His face was still calm and composed, but his words were as cold as ice. "I don't like any of them. This. You should like one or two, right? Simple and elegant, rich and rich, extraordinary and refined, there are so many different kinds. I don't like flowers." Shinjioli cut her off. Then the green peony and purple linglong that you accepted are. I didn't accept them." Shinjioli's voice was still indifferent. "But the flowers that were sent to your door are gone. Didn't you accept them? They were in the way, so they were destroyed." Shinjioli answered with 4 words. These 4 words seemed to be a bit of a blow to Shuama. Her bright eyes dimmed. "So you don't like to accept them?" She was still a bit shocked. After all, it wasn't easy for her to pick those flowers. She even got hurt a few times because of them. She didn't expect that her good intentions would be treated like trash by him. "You don't need to waste your effort. I won't agree to your marriage." Shinjioli was too lazy to talk nonsense with her. After saying this, he turned around and left. Do you think I'm ugly now? I can actually get better," Shuama said unwillingly behind him. It was said that there was a thin veil between a woman and a man. However, the veil between her and Shinjioli was too thick. Shinjioli didn't look back at all. His figure gradually disappeared. Shuama sighed. She was a bit hurt from being rejected by him again and again. She didn't want to chase him anymore. She looked down at the unpredictable sea below her. It was more important to get down to business. With a leap, she jumped down. Hua! A purple figure suddenly rushed up from the sea. At the same time, Shuama was jumping down. Coincidentally, the two of them jumped up and down, and Shuama crashed into that person. The man staggered after being hit. Fortunately, his kung fu was very good. He was not smashed into the sea by Shuama again. Instead, he raised his sleeve and hugged her. After swaying a little, he steadied himself in the air. Then, he looked at the person in his arms. His hand trembled, and he almost threw her into the sea again. So ugly. Shuama's lips twitched. She was indeed disgusted by her current appearance. With a flip of her body, she had already escaped from that person's embrace and was sizing him up a few times. That person was dressed in a gorgeous purple robe. Her features were picturesque, and she had a natural smile on her lips. She was as beautiful as an orchid tree. He looked elegant, and refined. He held a fan in his hand and waved it in the sea breeze. What a show-off. Shuama replied to him. She had never been at a disadvantage, so naturally, she would not be at a disadvantage with her words. That person smiled. Miss, why did you jump into the sea? Your appearance. Although you are a bit unconventional, you don't have to seek death, right? You should know that life is not easy. This person seemed to be comforting her, but every word and sentence of his was stepping on her sore spot. Shuama had the urge to scratch him. She raised her head. I'm not ugly. I'm just a little hurt. I'm not seeking death. I'm just here to pick herbs. That person touched the fan with his fingers and raised his eyebrows in surprise. Me? Miss, you are? Devil Master Amo, Shuama introduced herself. She addressed herself as Amo to the outside world. The name Shuama was only known to a limited number of people. That person's pair of glittering eyes slightly widened, continuously sizing her up. Chapter 1836. He did not expect the little girl in front of him to be the famous Devil Lord. He touched his fan again and bowed. So it's the Devil Lord. I didn't know and have offended you. He looked at Shuama again. Devil Lord's face is. Shuama said, I'm injured, so I need to pick herbs to treat it. The herb you want to pick is the cinnabar orchid? Shuama's eyes lit up slightly and she nodded. It seemed that the cinnabar orchid was indeed the herb to treat her face. The man in front of her also said so. The man frowned slightly. I'm afraid the cinnabar orchid is not easy to pick. There are tiger fox sharks guarding it. Shuama did not care. It doesn't matter. The tiger fox sharks are no match for me. Although Shuama's small face was covered in scars, her eyes were big and round, sparkling brighter than the stars in the sky. Her facial features were also very beautiful, especially when she spoke so proudly. It made people ignore the scars on her face and feel her beauty. She was petite and delicate, with long eyelashes that flickered. It made people want to protect her at first sight. It was easy to arouse a man's desire to protect her. The man's desire to protect her was obviously aroused by her. He blinked slightly and said with a smile, then, does the Devil Lord want me to be your bodyguard? I know a few techniques to deal with the tiger fox sharks. Shuama did not know what politeness was. Her eyelashes curved like the moon, and she agreed readily. Okay. The man did not expect Shuama to agree so readily. He was slightly stunned and looked at her with a complicated gaze. Do you know me? Shuama tilted her head and looked at him. I don't know you. You don't know me, but you dare to let me take the risk with you? The man could not help but ask. Shuama blinked and said very impolitely, why wouldn't I dare? If you dare to play tricks, I'll beat you up. She had rarely met a match in this world. The only one who could be considered a match was probably the supreme divinity. As for the others, her battle record was extremely brilliant. Anyone who refused to submit to her was beaten into submission by her. The man couldn't help but laugh. His smile was as beautiful as the moon. I didn't expect the Devil Lord to be so interesting. It was easy for good-looking men to win people's favor, especially men who liked to smile. Shuama also felt that this man was much more pleasing to the eye. She looked in the direction where Shinjioli had disappeared. Shinjioli had long disappeared. She couldn't even see the corner of his clothes. She was a little disappointed. It was so hard to chase a man. Since the other party was so stubborn, she was at her wit's end. Even if she recovered her looks, he would still treat her coldly, right? He wouldn't let her throw herself into his arms anymore. She looked at the man in front of her again. "You're the Divine Lord's friend? Did you come here with him?" The two of them appeared in the same body of water one after the other, so they should have come together. As for why Shinjioli left without waiting for his companions, had this Almighty ever waited for anyone else? It was always others who followed in his footsteps, okay? If she didn't happen to fall on this man, he would probably have chased after Shinjioli. The man smiled. He seemed to like smiling very much. His smile gave people a feeling of starlight. "Yes, we're friends. Very, very good friends. My name is Tian Chen. You can call me Tian Chen." "Okay, Tian Chen. Since you know that the vermilion light grass is guarded by the tiger fox shark, you must know where it grows. Let's go." Chapter 1837. Shuama was a straightforward person. What she urgently wanted now was to recover her face. Dao Tianxian nodded slightly. "Okay, I'll take you there. The bluer the sky, the darker the sea." When they reached the depths, the sea and sky were already the same color, making it difficult to distinguish between the blue sky and the sea. Dao Tianxian finally stopped. "This is the place." Shuama looked down. The sea here was deep blue like a gem. The snow-white waves rolled and the moonlight spread on the surface of the sea, sparkling like fragments of silver. The scenery here wasn't just any ordinary beauty. Dao Tianxian smiled. "Mo, do you want to enjoy the scenery here before going down?" "No thanks. Shuama was not in the mood to enjoy the scenery. Let's go down to pick the herbs." Her figure rose, and with a splash, she jumped into the sea. The sea looked so beautiful, but she did not expect it to be so cold. The temperature was 10 degrees below zero, but there was no sign of it freezing. This made Shuama a little unprepared. She shivered as soon as she entered the water. What was even more unexpected was that her waterproof clothes instantly froze the moment she entered the seawater. The clothes stuck to her body, making her feel extremely uncomfortable. She heard the sound of water splashing, and Dao Tianxian landed beside her. Most likely, he was already prepared for this, so he didn't notice anything unusual. Inside the water, he looked at Shuama's pale face and stretched out his arm to gently hug her waist. "I forgot to remind you. It's very cold here. I can warm you up." He grabbed nothing but air. Shuama's body was faintly flowing with red light. After a while, her face returned to normal. "It's okay, I can warm myself." She was obviously using the corresponding magic, and her body seemed to be covered by a layer of light red cover. Dao Tianxian was slightly stunned, and praised with a smile, "Mo's skills are indeed profound." Mo did not buy the compliment, and urged, "Where's the vermilion light grass? Let's go. Follow me." Dao Tianxian swam in front. Dao Tianxian swam in front of them at an extremely fast speed, like a barracuda piercing through the water. Surprisingly, Shuama didn't fall behind and followed closely behind him. She set up a barrier around her body. Although it could keep her body warm and her movements were flexible, it consumed a lot of magic power. After swimming in the water for half an hour, she was a little tired. "Why aren't they here yet?" She couldn't help but ask. Almost there, almost there." Dao Tianxian swam a little slower, side by side with her, and looked at her with concern. "Are you tired? Why don't I take you for a swim?" He reached out his hand to her. His hand was slender and fair, as delicate as jade. This reminded Shuama of Shinjioli's hand. the shape of their hands was very similar. Shuama didn't want him to hold her hand, but when she saw this familiar hand, she couldn't help but reach out her hand for him to hold. However, when he held her hand, she immediately felt the difference between the two. Shinjuli's hand was warm and dry. Every time he held her small hand, she felt warm. However, Dao Tianxin's hand was slightly cold and slippery, probably because they were in the water. His 5 fingers were also much softer than Shinjuli's. When he held her hand, she felt like she was being entangled. So when she felt that something was wrong, she immediately wanted to withdraw her hand. "I'll swim by myself. Don't try to be brave." Dao Tianxin's voice was gentle, but his grip on her hand was strong, and he had no intention of letting her go. Chapter 1838. It was indeed a lot easier for him to swim with her, so Shuama no longer struggled to break free from him. The two of them swam hand in hand like two mermaids. The scene was very harmonious and beautiful. Ning Shuama had been following Shuama Demon Lord unknowingly, so she naturally saw the scene. Little Shuama was really good at fighting, but she was still too inexperienced in dealing with people. She actually trusted a stranger so easily and followed him into such a dangerous area. This Dao Tianxin looked gentle and elegant, handsome and intelligent. He also had an immortal aura around him, so he didn't look like a bad guy. However, a bad guy didn't have "bad water" painted on his face. It was really dangerous for little Shuama to follow him blindly. Ning Shuama rubbed her eyebrows. She was really naive at that time. If it were her now, she would definitely not follow this person. She might even be on guard against him. Ning Shuama had been watching Dao Tianxin's every move, judging his kung fu through some of his subtle movements. After watching for a while, she raised her eyebrows. This Dao Tianxin seemed to be not much weaker than Shinjuli in terms of appearance and kung fu. If the two of them fought, it would probably be an earth-shattering battle. Was he really friends with Shinjuli? Ning Shuama had deep doubts in her heart. Shinjuli was used to being alone. Other than finding people to play chess with, he rarely traveled with others, not to mention coming here to take a bath with others. Even if Shinjuli was not used to waiting for others, he should have informed Shinjuli through the directed audio talisman if Dao Tianxin and Shuama came out together. Even if Shinjuli was not used to waiting for others, he should have informed Shinjuli through the directed audio talisman. Although this Dao Tianxin was very beautiful and looked like an immortal, Ning Shuama always felt that this person was a little strange, which made her vigilant. If it wasn't for this dream, Ning Shuama wouldn't have known that Dao Tianxin had once existed. It could be seen that this person didn't die in that catastrophe, but had retired. Then what role did he play in that catastrophe? According to the known clues, Ning Shuama couldn't figure it out, so she continued to follow. Where do you live now?" Dao Tianxin asked. 35th layer of heaven. Shuama answered straightforwardly. In order to make it easier for her to chase after him, she had specially opened up a territory on the 35th heaven and built a temporary residence just to be closer to him. "You are the devil master, why don't you stay in the devil world?" "I don't like living in the devil world, I like living in the 35th layer of heaven." Shuama still didn't want to reveal her true intentions to outsiders. Dao Tianxin's eyes flickered slightly, and he suddenly smiled. "You really don't look like a demon. Do demons have a fixed nature?" Shuama retorted. She just wanted to be herself and didn't care what she was. "That's a talent. I like it." Dao Tianxin leaned closer to her and kissed her on the hand. This was a little too much. After being educated by Shinjuli, Shuama had learned to keep a distance from men. Being held by the other party was already her bottom line, and now she was being kissed. Although it was just a kiss on the hand, it still made her frown slightly. With a flip of her wrist, she finally pulled her hand out of the other party's grasp. Dao Tianxin's hand was empty, and he looked at her. Your kung fu is really beyond my expectations. It's only been 3 days, and I have a whole new level of respect for you. Shuama glanced at him. You knew me before? Dao Tianchen smiled. In the water, his eyes were as intoxicating as the night. Guess. Chapter 1839. Shuama disliked this kind of guessing game the most. She was also disinclined to continue chatting with this person. Although they had a secret technique that allowed them to casually chat in the water, it was still a bit exhausting, okay? She hadn't picked the herbs yet, so she didn't want to waste any more energy. So she simply shook her head. I hate guessing the most. It's fine if you don't want to say it. Let's go and pick the herbs. Dao Tianchen followed beside her, his voice gentle. Mo, remember, I'll always be good to you. Who would believe that? She just met him, okay? Although he accompanied her to pick the herbs, it was still too early to say this. As a devil master, Shui Mo was usually surrounded by glib tongues. There were many people who tried to curry favor with her, so she had long since become immune to these kinds of words and simply ignored him. Mo, you seem to have something on your mind. If there's something you can't solve, you can tell me, I'll help you solve it. Dao Tianchen smiled warmly. Shuama's heart moved. She glanced at him. Have you ever pursued someone? Dao Tianchen fixed his gaze on her. Yes, I think so. This sentence was too ambiguous. Shuama hated people who didn't speak straightforwardly. She snorted. If you don't want to say it, then forget it. Dao Tianchen sighed and reached out his hand, as if he wanted to touch her hair, but he stopped halfway and smiled, this time answering with certainty, yes. Then have you caught up with him? How are you going to do it? Shuama's eyes sparkled. Dao Tianchen smiled softly and said, good girls are afraid of pestering men. If you can't catch up, then it's because you haven't pestered him enough. Shuama was a bit distressed. I've been pestering him for so long. But, maybe she hadn't pestered him enough. Then she would work harder after her injury was healed. Dao Tianchen suddenly said, we're here. Shuama looked up and saw a large patch of blue seaweed at the bottom of the sea. In the middle of the blue patch, there were 5 stalks of vermilion grass that shone like corals. The grass had its own fluorescent glow, and there were ginseng flower petals growing on top. This must be the vermilion grass. Shuama's eyes lit up. She pulled out her sword and slowly swam towards one of the vermilion orchids. She got closer. She got even closer. Shuama looked around. Why hadn't the tiger-fox shark come out yet? Didn't they say that there were many tiger-fox sharks here? Why didn't she see any of them? Could it be that they had sensed the scent of their devil master and knew that they could not afford to provoke her, so they ran away in fear? Although she didn't see the tiger-fox shark, she could clearly feel that the surrounding seawater was getting colder and colder. Even if she was in her own enchantment, she still wanted to shiver from the cold. Hey, where's the tiger-fox shark you were talking about? Shuama turned around and asked, but her eyes suddenly widened. Dao Tianchen, who had been chatting and smiling with her just now, had disappeared without a trace. There was only the rippling of the deep blue sea around her. Strange, where did this person go? He actually disappeared without a trace. She was about to look for him, but suddenly she seemed to have sensed something. Her body suddenly rushed forward. She moved 10 feet away out of thin air, and a huge mouth suddenly closed at the place where she was standing just now. Tiger-fox shark. Its body was streamlined like a shark, the patterns on its body were like tiger stripes, and its head was like a fox's head. Its sharp mouth had jagged fangs. It looked very delicate when it closed its mouth, but once it opened, it looked like a snake, and people could only see its bloody mouth. Shuama had no doubt that if she was bitten by this thing just now, she was afraid that half of her body would be gone. Because of the appearance of this thing, the surrounding seawater became colder, and there were even signs of freezing. Chapter 1840. Every time Shuama paddled in the water, she felt as if she was swimming in ice. Her speed slowed down a lot. Not only did this monster have the ability to freeze seawater, but it could also turn invisible. When it missed its target, it instantly melted into the surrounding seawater and disappeared. Shuama was a devil master after all. Her martial arts were not ordinary. She activated her eyesight and finally saw a slightly darker color in the surrounding seawater. It was the shape of the tiger fox shark. It was quickly approaching her without making any sound. Obviously, it still wanted to launch a surprise attack. Shuama clenched her sword tightly. She did not seem to see the tiger fox shark and quickly approached the cinnabar orchid. People would only be nervous when facing unknown danger. Once the danger became real, they would be able to deal with it calmly. Shuama decided to pick the grass first. Just as her hand was about to touch the vermilion grass, the grass suddenly moved and disappeared in a split second. A huge mouth appeared in its original place. Shuama's reaction was really fast. She retracted her hand at lightning speed. The fangs in the huge mouth almost grazed her skin. It turned out that the cinnabar orchid was not real grass. It was the tongue of the tiger fox shark. This thing could hide its entire body in the water and only reveal a tongue that looked like the cinnabar orchid to trick people. Since there were already 2 tiger fox sharks, would there be more hiding in the dark? Shuama's gaze turned to the remaining 4 cinnabar orchids. How many of them were real? She had never seen the cinnabar orchid before. She had only heard about it from others. Therefore, she could not tell if the cinnabar orchid in front of her were real or fake. Picking the cinnabar orchid could not be done with any utensils. It could only be picked by hand. Moreover, it could not be damaged in any way. Otherwise, it would lose its effect. Therefore, Shuama could not use a hidden weapon to test it. She could only touch the cinnabar orchid one by one. The tiger fox shark was as cunning as a fox. If it did not bite, it would immediately turn invisible and wait for a chance to attack again. Shuama pursed her lips. She stayed in the same spot and seemed to be in a daze. A tiger fox shark swam silently. When it was in front of her, it slowly opened its mouth, shwa. With the sound of water splashing, a cold sword light flashed in Shuama's hand. With a puff, it directly pierced into the big mouth, turning and stirring. A shrill scream came from the water, and blood spurted out from that big mouth. The tiger fox shark's tongue seemed to be its vital point. With its vital point cut off, the tiger fox shark let out a sharp cry and flipped over in the water. Shuama smirked. She wanted to plot against her? No way. She had killed a tiger fox shark, and it seemed that the other one was stunned as well. The tiger fox shark began to retreat silently. Shuama blinks her eyes and her figure flashes as she pounces towards that tiger fox shark. If she could break them one by one, then she would break them one by one. She wanted to force out the other tiger fox sharks that were hiding in the dark. Once she fought with her life on the line, even the tyrant tiger fox shark in this area of water would not be her opponent. She actually caught up to him in the blink of an eye and slashed at him with her sword. That tiger fox shark couldn't dodge in time and was struck in the head. Then, the sword seemed to have cut into oil as it slid to the side. That tiger fox shark's skin was not cut at all. After being stunned for a moment, it let out a sharp cry. This time, it was a proud cry. It no longer opened its mouth and swung its tail in the water. The surrounding seawater actually turned into sharp ice arrows and shot toward Shuama. Chapter 1841. Shuama spun her sword and created a protective barrier around her body. When the ice arrows hit the barrier, they made a deafening sound. After a dense circle of ice arrows shot out, Shuama was turned into a hedgehog-like ice ball. She could no longer move. The tiger fox shark circled around the ice ball, but the little person inside the ice ball didn't move at all. It was as if she was shot to death by the ice arrows. The tiger fox shark's egg-like eyes emitted a greedy light. It opened its mouth and wanted to swallow the ice ball. However, the change happened in an instant. The girl inside the ice ball suddenly moved. A cold sword light came out from the ice ball and shot into the tiger fox shark's mouth. The tiger fox shark let out a shrill cry that was even more ear-piercing than the previous one. Half of its tongue was cut off. The tiger fox shark had to cut off its entire tongue to kill it. Only cutting off half of its tongue was enough to seriously injure it. This tiger fox shark was probably in extreme pain. It kept rolling around and screaming, shaking the surrounding seawater to the point that it sounded like a pot of boiling water. Shuama jumped on its head and stabbed its eyes and nostrils with her sword from time to time as if she was venting her anger. Although the tiger fox shark's skin could withstand any kind of attack, its eyes and nostrils were still relatively weak. Moreover, the Devil Lord's strength was not to be underestimated. Every time she stabbed, it would draw a line of blood, making the tiger fox shark roll around and scream even louder. This was a method of killing the chicken to scare the monkey. The other tiger fox sharks that hadn't shown up yet began to tremble and quietly retreat. There were originally 4 vermilion orchids on the green grassland, but now, 3 of them had automatically disappeared. Obviously, the 3 vermilion orchids were fake. They were the tiger fox shark's tongues. Shuama looked at the only vermilion orchids left in the northwest corner and narrowed her big eyes. She finally found the real vermilion orchids. She was indeed the smartest. She smiled until her eyes were squinted, and 2 dimples appeared on her cheeks. She finished off the tiger fox shark that she had tortured until it was half dead. Then, she turned around and swam towards the vermilion orchids. She was going to freeze to death. She wanted to end the battle quickly, pick the vermilion orchid, and run. She did not want to waste any more time here. This place was really too cold. Her clothes were frozen into iron. As she swam, the clothes on her body began to fall off piece by piece. Her attention was focused on the vermilion orchid and she didn't notice the problem with her clothes. Her body was already numb from the cold, so she couldn't feel whether she was wearing anything or not. Her swimming speed was not slow. Soon, she reached the side of the vermilion orchid and reached out her small hand to pluck it. Vermilion orchid grass. You're finally mine. Swoosh. A white light suddenly flashed by and struck the only remaining stalk of vermilion light grass with a loud smack. The water rippled slightly, and the vermilion light grass broke off. It withered in the blink of an eye and disappeared. Bastard. Who had plotted against her precious grass? Shuama turned around angrily, but before she could see anything clearly, something fell from the sky and covered her from head to toe. Shuama was shocked. The speed of this thing was too fast. She didn't even have time to dodge. She didn't even see what was covering her. All she could see was white. She was about to pull the thing off when she heard the sound of water splashing. Then, she felt a grip on her waist and heard a familiar voice, "Be good, don't move." Chapter 1842. Just as she was about to pull it off, she heard the sound of water splashing. Then, she felt a grip on her waist and heard a familiar voice, "Be good and don't move." Shuama widened her eyes. Shinjioli. It was Shinjioli's voice. She pulled the top of her head with her small hands and finally revealed her head. She then realized that she was wrapped in a large robe and was being held in Shinjioli's arms. The robe was so big that it wrapped her up so tightly that not even her toes could be seen. She couldn't be more familiar with the material and texture of the robe. It was Shinjioli's outer robe. Not only was the robe comfortable, it was also very warm. It quickly warmed up her cold skin. Shuama was very surprised. "Jioli, where did you come from?" Suddenly, she remembered the herb she had been longing for. She quickly looked in that direction, but there wasn't even a single blade of grass left. "Why did you destroy my grass?" She recognized the technique he used. He was the one who released the white light. Shinjioli didn't even look at her and didn't intend to answer her question. His left arm hugged the restless Shuama while his right hand transformed into a sword. He slashed in a direction, "Come out." The sword light caused the water in that direction to rise like a wall. A purple figure appeared in the water wall. It was Dao Tianxin, who had just disappeared. A cinnabar orchid was blooming at his fingertips. He smiled and said, "Jiuli, we haven't seen each other for a long time. It's not good to release such a big move, right?" His gaze fell on Shuama and he smiled even more gently. "Mo, didn't you want the cinnabar orchid? Come and get it." Shuama looked at Dao Tianxin and then turned to look at Shinjiuli. She was obviously confused, but she was still very obsessed with the cinnabar orchid. She stared at the grass with her big eyes. "So you've already picked this long ago?" Dao Tianxin smiled faintly, and his voice became even softer. "I said that I will help you." He flicked his finger, and the stalk of grass floated toward Shuama. Its speed was quite fast. Shuama subconsciously struggled out of Shinjiuli's arms and wanted to catch it. Shinjiuli waved his sleeve and the grass disappeared. "Shuama, why do you always destroy my grass?" Shuama's eyes widened. "It's poisonous." Shinjiuli. "Ugh." Shuama turned to Dao Tianxin. "You lied to me." Dao Tianxin, a glimmer of light flashed through his eyes and he raised his hand to rub his forehead. "Mo, you trust him that much? You think it's poisonous just because he said so? Maybe he just doesn't want you to take my things, or maybe he doesn't want you to return to your original appearance." This sentence was very provocative, but Mo didn't buy it. "He's not as stupid as you." "I trust him." Dao Tianxin. This little girl really trusted Shinjiuli more than a little. "She's just a child, Luo Jiuchen. Don't put your ideas on her." Shinjiuli's voice was cold, but it was full of warning. "Child? Shinjiuli, maybe you only see her as a child, but I already see her as a woman. She's really to my liking." Dao Tianxin, "No." Luo Jiuchen smiled and looked at Shuama with eyes so gentle that it seemed to melt. "Mo, I really like you. But I don't like you." Chapter 1843. "I don't like you," Shuama said crisply. "You don't even have a real name." He actually gave her a fake name. The smile on Luo Jiuchen's face didn't change. His words were still filled with tenderness. "Mo, a name is just a code. But my heart for you will never change." Before he could finish his words, a white light shot towards him, accompanied by Shinjiuli's cold voice. "You can say these flowery words to other women." Luo Jiuchen waved his fan, and a blue light flew out to meet the white light. There was an earth-shattering sound, and a bottomless whirlpool appeared where the white light and blue light collided, causing the surrounding seawater to be crazily sucked into it. Shuama's hair was also blown up by the whirlpool. If it wasn't for Shinjiuli holding her, perhaps her small body would have been sucked in by the whirlpool. She had been in the water for too long, and she had used up too much of her MF. Now that she was being sucked in by the whirlpool, she couldn't breathe. Her small face was a little pale, and she struggled in Shinjiuli's arms. He was holding her so tightly that she couldn't breathe. After the loud sound, Luo Jiuchen disappeared, as if he had been swept away by the whirlpool. "Don't move, I'll bring you up." Shinjiuli's voice was still cold, but he raised his hand to gather her hair that was flying around and causing her scalp to hurt. His body moved, and he brought her up. Shuama hadn't been in his arms for a long time. At this time, she took advantage of the situation and hugged his waist like an octopus. She leaned her head on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat in the water. She loved this feeling so much. Her arms tightened around him, and she nuzzled her head against his chest again. Being hugged like this, Shinjiuli's body slightly stiffened. His arms moved as if he wanted to do something, but he inadvertently looked down at her long, curly eyelashes and her small, satisfied mouth. He gave up and brought her up directly. She didn't know if it was because she was wrapped in his robe, but Shuama's body was getting warmer and warmer, making her a little anxious and short of breath. She couldn't breathe in the water. Originally, she used a spell to breathe through her skin like a fish, but she didn't know what was going on, but that ability suddenly disappeared. She immediately felt suffocated. At this time, she was more than 100 meters deep. Because of the water pressure, the two couldn't go up too quickly, or their bodies. Hence, Shinjioli carried her at a normal speed. They couldn't reach the surface. As Shinjioli carried her up the stairs, he suddenly felt that something was wrong with her. He looked down and saw that her lips were tightly pursed and her face was flushed red. She was trying her best to break free from him and climb up the stairs by herself. What's going on? Shinjioli then realized that not only was she in danger of suffocating, but her body was also burning hot. After a while, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She opened her mouth slightly, wanting to breathe. She was simply asking to be choked by opening her mouth to breathe in the water. But she couldn't care less in this situation where she was suffocating. She had just opened her mouth, but before she could choke on the first mouthful of water, the shadow in front of her darkened, and her lips were covered by someone. Then, a breath of life-saving air blew into her mouth. She greedily inhaled this breath of air, and used her nose to exhale the foul air in her body. She blew a stream of bubbles in the water. Chapter 1844. She greedily inhaled the breath and exhaled the foul air from her body through her nose. She blew a stream of bubbles in the water. With this breath, her drowsy mind finally cleared up a little. She opened her eyes and saw a handsome face in front of her. His lips were on hers, and when she opened her eyes, her long eyelashes brushed against his cheeks. He suddenly raised his head and looked down at her apple-like face. "Are you feeling better?" She nodded, and her eyes were sparkling. "I was just passing air to you. Don't think too much." Shinjioli spoke again. Shuama blinked. She knew that he was passing air to her. How could she think too much? What could she think? She didn't know what was going on. Her body was soft, and even her magic had disappeared. Naturally, she couldn't speak in the water. But her eyes were too pure, and all her emotions were written in them. Shinjioli easily guessed what she was thinking. He was suffocating. So he was thinking too much. Shuamo really liked the feeling of passing on air. Earlier, when his lips were on hers, not only did it release her from suffocation, it also made her hot and dry body feel a trace of indescribable coolness. In front of him, she didn't know how to hide her emotions, and her actions were much more casual. So she felt that it would make her feel more comfortable. She immediately wanted to feel more comfortable. She raised her head and took the initiative to find his lips, wanting him to pass air to her. Shinjioli was very stingy. After passing air to her, he refused to pass air to her again. He said, "Bear with it." His speed suddenly increased. After a while, he finally came out of the water with her in his arms. A large amount of fresh air rushed in, and Shuema breathed in big mouthfuls of air. The problem of breathing was solved, but there was another problem that needed to be solved. She was too hot. Her whole body was uncomfortably hot. She raised her hand and tore off the robe on her body. Her movements were too fast. When Shinjioli realized, half of the robe on her body had already been torn off. Half of her shoulders and chest were exposed. Because she had to painstakingly maintain the appearance of a 12 or 13-year-old, her body had yet to fully develop. Her breasts were not even as big as a steamed bun. Her waterproof red clothes had been destroyed very artistically. There were holes everywhere, and the parts that should not be exposed were all exposed. The parts that could be exposed were covered very tightly. It was just like the sexy clothes now. It was just that she didn't realize it. Shinjioli held his breath and raised his hand to wrap her tightly again. "Don't move. I'm hot." Her pair of watery eyes looked at him, her little face was abnormally pink, and even the breath she exhaled from her little mouth was scorching hot. She was drugged with an aphrodisiac. Damn it. Shinjuli's eyes darkened as he cursed under his breath. The little fellow in his arms was becoming more and more restless under the effects of the drug. He clamped her hands, and she used her soft little body to rub against him. She desperately tried to burrow into his arms. I'm hot, hot, hot. Shuama obviously didn't know what was going on with her. She only felt that the blood in her body was boiling. Only by leaning against him did she feel a little better. She wanted to tear off the robe on her body, but Shinjuli held her hands tightly, so she couldn't do it. She couldn't help but become very anxious and struggled in his arms. Shinjuli flew up with her. He had brought a lot of drugs with him, but he didn't have an antidote for this. He needed to refine it on land. Chapter 1845. Shuama could not break away from his embrace. When she raised her head, she saw his beautiful chin. Her heart warmed, and an inexplicable desire overwhelmed her. She could not help but raise her head and kiss his chin. Behave yourself. Shinjuli reprimanded her. He tried to raise his chin as high as possible to break away from the poison of her little mouth. Since she was drugged, he could not hit her acupuncture points to let her sleep. Otherwise, the poison would linger in her 8 extraordinary meridians and be harder to cure. As soon as he raised his head, her little mouth landed on his neck and kissed his Adam's apple. Shinjuli almost threw her out. He roughly pressed her into his arms and said, "Be good." Shuama's little face was buried in his arms. Her nose was filled with the unique cold fragrance of his body. She was not immune to his body's fragrance. Now, under the influence of the drug, she could not control herself. She wanted to kiss him. She rubbed her little face on his chest. Shinjuli was only wearing his inner robe at the moment. She rubbed against him and opened his clothes. His chest felt cold and then hot. The cold was because of the wind, and the hot was because her little mouth kissed him again. She kissed him on his well-defined skin. Shinjuli's arms stiffened. He quickly pulled her away from his arms. With a flick of his fingers, his clothes were fastened again. This time, even his neck was covered, so she could not kiss him. Devil Master, be more serious. His tone was a little strict, just like how he reprimanded her when she made a mistake when she was a child. Shuama was in a daze. She felt as if she had returned to her childhood. She felt uncomfortable, hot, and empty. This kind of discomfort made her anxious and aggrieved. When she was young and was by his side, whenever he wanted to punish her for something she wanted or made a mistake, she only needed to cry a little and his heart would soften. The punishment would be lighter and he would give her the thing she wanted without any hesitation. She had subconsciously grasped this pattern, so she could not help but use it at this moment. Her small mouth flattened and tears rolled down from her big eyes. I feel terrible, Jolie, I feel terrible. I don't want to wear your clothes, they're too hot. Although her small face was still covered in bruises, she still looked pitiful, especially when she was crying. Those tears seemed to drip into one's heart. You've been poisoned. It's not because of your clothes. I'll take you to detoxify the poison. Just bear with it for a while. Shinjuli rarely opened his mouth to explain. Unfortunately, the aphrodisiac was too strong. Shuama was already a little dazed and couldn't understand what he was saying. She was still desperately trying to get into his arms, her body was burning hot, and she kept twisting and turning. Shinjuli, who had always been calm, finally felt a little breathless. He sighed. In the end, he lifted his hand and sealed her acupoints. He didn't make her fall asleep, but only made her unable to move her limbs. She finally became obedient in his arms and stopped moving. However, because her body was too uncomfortable, she couldn't express it anymore. She just stared at him with her eyes wide open. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She looked very wronged. Shinjuli moved his eyes away and said coldly, "Are you an idiot? You even believe the words of strangers." Now you're going to suffer. Although he was reprimanding her, he flew even faster. Ning Xuema had been following them in the air. Everything fell into her eyes. She faintly felt that she wasn't dreaming. If she was dreaming, it would be very messy. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.